Wounds on a battlefield glowing with a heavenly blue light. A lawyer running head-on into glass on the 24th floor of a building to show how strong glass is before something goes terribly wrong. A CIA program that actually turned a cat into a Cold War spy, a bunny man, a dog boy. It all sounds completely made up, but these are more urban legends that turned out to be terrifyingly real. The legend goes that cruel, twisted strangers slip poison or razor blades into children's trick-or-treat bags. Parents check their kids' candy every year because of this. I mean, you should check. It's just the responsible thing to do, but some actually write poisoned Halloween candy off as a total myth. It isn't. Even though actual cases are incredibly rare, it has been known to happen. One of the most disturbing cases happened on Halloween night in 1974. A man named Ronald Clark O'Brien decided to take the life of his own son to collect a massive life insurance payout. To cover his tracks and to make it look like there was a random lunatic. O'Brien bought pixie sticks candy, opened them up, stuffed them with fatal doses of cyanide, and then stapled them shut. He gave one to his son, one to his daughter, and handed 3 out to random kids in the neighborhood. His son ate the candy and died before reaching the hospital. Thankfully, the other children didn't eat theirs. O'Brien, dubbed the Candyman by inmates, was rightfully executed in 1984. Good riddance. An escaped mental patient dressed in a white rabbit suit hides out an old railway bridge in Virginia, attacking teenagers with an axe and hanging gutted rabbits from the framework. Classic urban legend kind of story, right? But it actually began with 2 genuine 1970 police reports in Fairfax County. On October 19th, a couple parked on a dark road saw a figure creep out of the bushes wearing a white suit with long bunny ears, screaming about private property. The man then hurled a hatchet straight through their passenger window before they floored it. 10 days later, a security guard named Paul Phillips spotted the same costumed man on the porch of an unfinished house. When confronted, the man began hacking a wooden pillar with an axe, threatening to chop off the guard's head. Philip went to grab his firearm, but the rabbit man bolted into the woods. Police received over 50 sightings in the coming weeks. The guy was now known as the Virginia Bunny Man, and some pretty wild rumors started to spread about him. One story went that the guy ate a cat alive. No one was ever caught. By the 90s, the internet transformed it into a ghost story about an escaped killer from 1904. The old asylum backstory is made up, but those 2 police reports from 1970 are entirely real. Who the man was, that's still a total mystery. In Quitman, Arkansas, there's an urban legend about a werewolf-like creature known as the Dog Boy of Quitman. The story goes that a creepy Victorian house in town was haunted by this giant werewolf-like monster. A cursed boy grew up there, eventually turning into a beast, walked on all 4s, howled at the moon, and hunted local pets. But the real story, it's a million times worse. There was nothing supernatural about it. The monster was a real guy named Gerald Floyd Bettis. Born in 1954, Gerald was a huge kid who grew up to 6'4", weighing around 300 pounds. He got the nickname Dog Boy because he used to collect every stray dog and cat he could find. But he wasn't trying to save them. He built extra rooms onto his parents' house to trap the animals and torment them. Neighbors said they could hear the poor things crying from the street. Eventually, Gerald turned that cruelty on his own parents. He kept his elderly mom and dad locked upstairs, only letting them eat when he felt like it. One day, he threw his father right out of the 2nd-story window. His dad survived by clinging to the ledge until cops showed up. Gerald was finally locked up after the state rescued his mom. He died in prison in 1988. If you're into history, you might have heard about the Angel's Glow story. The story goes that during a nasty Civil War battle, a bunch of wounded soldiers were saved by a literal miracle. As they lay there, dying in the dark, their open wounds suddenly started glowing with this blue light. Rumor was that angels had come down to the battlefield, using a heavenly glow to keep the men alive until medics could finally get to them. Sounds like a total fairy tale, but the glowing wounds were 100% real. Except it wasn't angels, it was glowing worms throwing up inside the soldiers' bodies. Sounds slightly less enchanting, but still very cool. Went down in April of 1862 at the Battle of Shiloh in Tennessee. It was brutal. Over 16,000 soldiers were wounded. Medics were obviously totally overwhelmed. Hundreds of men were left stranded out in the freezing rain and mud. for 2 full days. As night fell, the men noticed this faint greenish blue light radiating right out of their injuries. When doctors finally reached them, they realized the guys who glowed actually healed way faster, survived at a much higher rate. The mystery wasn't solved until 2001, when a 17-year-old high school kid named Bill Martin visited the battlefield. His mom happened to be a microbiologist, so he and his friend decided to do a science project to figure out what actually happened. Well, they discovered that the mud at Shiloh was packed with tiny microscopic worms. When the soldiers sat in the freezing mud for days, their body temperatures dropped, creating the perfect chilly environment for these worms to crawl right into their open wounds. And once they got inside, the worms vomited up a special soil bacteria called Photorhabdus luminescens. This bacteria naturally glows in the dark, but more importantly, it acts as a natural antibiotic. It completely killed off all the bad, deadly germs in the wounds, basically sterilizing the injuries and saving the soldiers' lives. So, hey, it was kind of a miracle, just a miracle of nature. We've all heard the vague urban legends about someone stumbling into their bathroom in the middle of the night, half asleep, lifting up the toilet lid, only to hear something splashing around inside, and then they look down and see a wet, frantic rat in the water. For decades, there have been stories of terrifying creatures lurking in city sewers. Most famous one is probably the classic myth about New Yorkers flushing baby alligators down their drains, creating this colony of giant gators beneath the streets. Luckily, most of that is fake. People may have flushed baby gators down the toilet, as cruel as that is, but alligators would freeze to death down there in the winter. But finding a live rodent swimming in a toilet bowl, that is absolutely possible. The toilet's drain pipes are usually at least 3 inches wide, which gives a rat plenty of room to move. They're drawn into the sewer lines looking for food scraps, and because they're expert swimmers who can hold their breaths for minutes, they have no problem navigating the pipes right into your home. In 1999, a woman in Petersburg, Virginia was actually bitten on the rear end by a rat that crawled up out of her toilet. So, new fear unlocked. We've all heard the stories about mutated animals in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Turns out many of the animals do have odd mutations, but there's one urban legend about a mutated spider that takes things to a much more horrific level. After all, who would ever want to run into a mutated spider? Unless you thought you'd have a chance to turn out like Peter Parker, but that's not the case with this story. So, a story about a killer mutant spider from Chernobyl was reported in a Turkish newspaper in 1990. 2 residents of an apartment in the Ukraine had been found in the elevator having suffered extreme loss of BLOOD, but none of it was found at the scene. It looked like it had been sucked out of them, as there were also 2 puncture wounds on their necks. People started to whisper tales about vampires stalking the building, and some residents got so scared that they avoided using the elevators completely. Then 2 detectives investigated. On the 3rd day of their investigation, the detectives were riding the elevator when it came to an abrupt stop between the 5th and 6th floors. Then the lights went out. Now at first they weren't too worried. The elevator was known to be pretty janky at times, but when they started hearing an ominous clicking noise coming from above their heads, they froze. What was this? Was it the predator? They removed one of the roof panels and shone their flashlights, only to see a foot-long black shape moving towards them. Suddenly, it was on top of one of the detectives. His partner fired at it. When backup arrived, they found the detective cowering in a corner, a mutated spider across from him. When police explored the rest of the elevator shaft, they found the thing had laid eggs, which they burnt to a crisp with flamethrowers. Many people believe these monstrous spiders were born out of the Chernobyl disaster caused by radiation exposure that altered their genes. Were aliens involved in the Chernobyl disaster? Well, there's a conspiracy that says they very well may have been, but not in the way you're probably thinking. Instead of being blamed for the meltdown itself, extraterrestrial beings are rumored to have actually helped prevent an even worse catastrophe. The theory goes that when the disaster happened, aliens may have intervened to help contain the situation. Now, what is this actually based on? Well, nothing. One eyewitness, Mikhail Varitsky, reported seeing a strange fiery ball of light hovering above the reactor during the night of the accident. He described it as a glowing orb that hung in the air for a few minutes. In his exact words, "I and other people from my team went to the site of the blast at night. We saw a ball of fire and it was slowly flying in the sky. I think the ball was 6 or 8 meters in diameter. Then we saw 2 rays of crimson light stretching towards the fourth unit. The object was some 300 meters from the reactor. The event lasted for about 3 minutes. The lights of the object went out and it flew away in the northwestern direction." End quote. Some people think this may have been an alien craft, and this wasn't the only sighting either. There had apparently been a number of UFO sightings in the sky in the days leading up to the accident, so were extraterrestrials helping to manage the radiation and prevent it from spreading uncontrollably? Did the Bible predict the Chernobyl disaster? Well, some interpret a passage from the book of Revelation to be pretty eerily accurate to the events. There's a passage that talks about a great star falling from the sky and poisoning the water, and that star is called wormwood. Well, in Russian, Chernobyl translates to wormwood, which has led many to think the Bible was somehow foreshadowing the disaster. The exact passage goes as follows: "And the third angel sounded the trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, burning as it were a torch, and it fell on the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter." Now, aside from the wormwood thing, there are other similarities here. Firefighters at Chernobyl described the fires at Reactor 4 as burning like a torch, just like in the scripture. And the part about bitter waters could definitely be interpreted as the radiation seeping into local water, making it unsafe to drink. There's even a sculpture near Chernobyl showing an angel with a trumpet, created by a Ukrainian artist as a tribute to the firefighters and workers who risked their lives during the crisis. Up next, we have the tale of the scream. So in 1997, a nuclear physicist named Andrei Korsakov from the University of Buffalo had an eerie experience at the Chernobyl power plant. While visiting the site of Reactor 4, he reported hearing a faint but frantic voice screaming for help as he was taking radiation readings in the infamous Ground Zero area at around 7:30 in the morning. Now, after hearing the screams, Korsakov rushed back upstairs to tell the personnel what he heard, but to his shock, they told him that he was the first person to enter that restricted area in 3 years. The security protocols were strict, too. Entry required a password, handprint scan, and any unauthorized presence would trigger a whole whackload of alarms. So, who had been screaming? In 1996, a researcher named Vitaly Pravitsev looked into the possibility of the accident having been caused by an earthquake. People were pretty skeptical though. Experts pointed out over 80 discrepancies in his report, but then in 1997, a group of scientists from the United Institute of the Physics of the Earth took another look into this. They found that on the night of April 25th to the 26th, just 16 seconds before the reactor exploded, 3 nearby geological stations recorded a weak seismic event. So did an earthquake cause this disaster? And if so, was it natural, or was there a possibility that it was intentional? Sounds crazy, but the idea of weaponized earthquakes isn't entirely out of the realm of possibility. During the Cold War, there were rumors that both the Soviet Union and the US were researching tectonic weapons. We don't know for sure if these weapons were actually ever developed or used, but some think they may have been, of course, in secret. I mean, even Nikola Tesla claimed to have created a device in 1898 that could produce earthquake-like effects. An article in Pravda, the former Soviet newspaper, claimed in 1992 that geophysical weapons were indeed developed, but the government denied this. In 2004, a woman using the name Hasume made a post on the Japanese forum 2channel while sitting on a train late at night. Other passengers were asleep. This was her normal commute to work, but the train hadn't stopped in a long time. Stations were being skipped and no announcements were being made. Hasume tried to contact the conductor or driver but couldn't get a response. Unsure what else to do, she posted online asking for advice. People started replying as she gave updates in real time. After about an hour, the train finally stopped. Hasume stepped onto an empty platform. The station sign read Kisaragi Station. There were no staff. The train departed, leaving her alone. She stayed at the station and continued posting. Users quickly searched online and told her there was no station by the name anywhere in Japan and urged her to leave immediately. Hasume walked outside and tried to find a taxi, but no dice. She eventually found a phone booth and called her parents, asking them to pick her up. They tried, but of course, they had no idea where Kisaragi Station was. As time passed, Hasumi described the area as deeply unsettling. She could hear a bell tolling somewhere nearby, along with a drum beat that slowly grew louder. Deciding she couldn't stay there, she started walking along the train tracks to escape. While following the tracks, a voice suddenly shouted from behind her, "Hey, don't walk on the track, it's dangerous." When Hasumi turned around, she saw a man. He only had one leg. For a moment she was relieved though, he'd be able to tell her where the hell she was, but then he vanished into thin air. Panicking, she ran into a nearby tunnel and injured herself along the way. After reaching the other side, a man greeted her and offered to help. The two returned to Kisaragi Station and boarded another train. This train carried them into a remote area of the Japanese Alps. At first the man was speaking normally, but then he slowly became incoherent, began muttering nonsense, and then fell silent. Hasumi made one final post. "My battery's almost run out. Things are getting strange, so I think I'm gonna make a run for it." And that was the last anyone heard from her. This next one is called Gozu, the Cowhead Story. It's a story about a story. The story in question is said to be so terrifying that hearing it all the way through can kill you. At best, you'll be in a state of shock, unable to speak for the rest of your life. In some versions, listeners die days later in accidents after hearing it. Now, the most common version involves a teacher telling students a scary story on a bus or during class. Halfway through, the teacher realizes what he's saying and tries to stop, but it's too late. The teacher gets locked into this trance, unable to stop telling the story. When help arrives, the bus is wrecked or the class is unresponsive, with the teacher and students in a total daze, unable to speak, barely able to move. But what is this utterly terrifying story that puts listeners in a state of shock and utter terror? Nobody knows. This is that classic example that some of the scariest horror touches on the fear of the unknown, the unexplainable. Even Japanese horror writers have commented on it, saying the fear comes from suggestion. It's been referenced in Japanese literature and media as early as the 20th century. Late at night, on quiet roads, drivers in parts of Japan have reported a motorcycle coming up behind them. When the bike pulls alongside, the driver is horrified when they realize the biker has no head. In some versions of the legend, the rider is searching for his missing head. In others, he's looking for the person who caused his death. A few stories say he rides next to cars, matching their speed, tapping on their windows, or daring the driver to look straight at him. If they do, crashes are said to follow not long after. The legends seem to come about after the Australian film Stone in 1974. There's a scene in the movie where a rider's head is lobbed off after running into a wire stretched across the road. When the movie reached Japan in 1981, stories about headless riders started spreading alongside real stories of motorcycle accidents. There are also more ordinary explanations. A rider in a dark full-face helmet on an unlit road can look headless at the right angle. And some Japanese bikers have even admitted to wearing non-reflective black helmets on purpose just to mess with drivers. And next we have the legend of Turbo Granny, which doesn't sound scary in the slightest. And the fact that this is a Japanese story, it's kind of making me picture a huge mech robot in the form of an old lady, but the tale is actually much creepier. The story goes that if you're driving on mountain roads late at night, especially in rural areas, you might see an elderly woman running beside your car. At first you assume it's your eyes playing tricks on you, but then you speed up and she keeps pace. Some versions say she can run over 100 kilometers per hour. Others say she rides in the back of your car, laughing and tapping on your trunk and windows. If you stop, she'll just catch up. If you don't, accidents tend to happen. Drivers report engines stalling, steering locking, or tires blowing out right as she appears. Turbo Granny became popular in the 80s and 90s when car culture really exploded in Japan and young drivers were racing through mountain passes at night. She became a kind of roadside ghost story. Some versions say she's the spirit of an old woman killed by a car. Others say she's always existed, attached to roads where people often die. Here's a classic Toronto urban legend that turned out to actually be true. If you grew up around here, you've probably heard the story about a lawyer, in some versions he's a real estate agent, who had a weird habit of sprinting full speed into his office windows just to prove how indestructible the glass was. Well, one day when he slams into a pane, it gives way, and he flies straight out of the skyscraper to his death. His story is actually 100% true. The man was Gary Hoy, a super successful corporate lawyer and senior partner at a firm located on the 24th floor of the Toronto Dominion Centre. Gary was incredibly proud of the building's architecture and loved showing off the safety of the modern glass. Well, on July 9th, 1993, the firm was hosting a party for a group of visiting law students. Wanting to impress the new recruits, Gary decided to perform his signature stunt. He took a running start across his office and threw his entire weight directly into the glass wall. The glass didn't shatter, actually. Instead, Gary hit the window so hard the entire pane popped right out of the steel frame. Gary and the massive sheet of glass plummeted 24 stories. He died instantly. And fun fact, back in high school, I was hanging out at a buddy's place and we got to talking about this story and his dad was like, yeah, it's true. I actually knew the guy. The CIA using cats as spies? That sounds incredibly far-fetched, but in the 60s, they actually ran a program doing exactly that. It was called Acoustic Kitty, and it came from the CIA's Office of Technical Service, the same group working on experimental surveillance tools during the Cold War. The idea was to turn a cat into this mobile listening device that could casually wander near Soviet targets without raising suspicion. They surgically implanted this tiny microphone in the cat's ear canal, ran a thin transmitter under its skin, and placed a wire antenna along its body and tail. In theory, the cat would be trained to sit near conversations and transmit audio back to a nearby receiver. After years of very expensive preparation, the first field test was a complete disaster. The cat was released near a park close to the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. But, like something straight out of Austin Powers, instead of walking toward the target, it wandered into oncoming traffic and was hit by a taxi. So that put an end to that program. You know that irrational fear you get when elevator doors open and for a split second you're terrified the car isn't actually there, or worse, the machine will start suddenly moving while you're halfway inside. Well, back in 2003, that became a gruesome reality at a hospital in Houston, Texas. Dr. Hitoshi Nakaido was a 35-year-old surgical resident at Christus St. Joseph Hospital. On August 16th, his colleague Karen Stenau was standing inside an elevator on the second floor, holding the door for him as he rushed to catch a ride. The elevator had actually been out of service for repairs just days before, but warning signs were gone, so they assumed that it was totally safe. Nakaido asked if it was working, and as he stepped forward, tried to shoulder his way through the closing doors. Normally, the sensors would force the doors back open, right? The elevator completely malfunctioned. Instead of stopping, the car immediately started rising with Nakaido still pinned right in the doorway. He tried to pull himself back, but he was completely trapped. As the elevator forced its way upward, Nakaido's head was crushed by the ceiling of the doorway. His body fell all the way down to the bottom of the elevator shaft, but the absolute worst part, his head fell backward right into the elevator car. Karen was trapped inside that broken lift with the remains of her colleague for over an hour before rescue workers could finally get her out. We've all heard the creepy urban legends about people hearing weird scratching or thumping noises inside their walls, assuming it's just mice, only to find someone was actually trapped in there. Well, in May 2011, this happened at a bank in Abbeville, Louisiana. The bank started renovating their empty second floor, and a construction worker went to tear down an old closed-off brick chimney. When he pulled on some fabric hanging from the chute, he was showered with old clothes and human bones. The police ran DNA tests, finally put an end to a 27-year-old mystery. The remains belonged to a 22-year-old guy named Joseph Schneider, completely vanished all the way back in January 1984. At the time, he was running from a minor stolen vehicle charge, so when he disappeared, his family just assumed that he'd skipped town to evade the cops. Instead, he'd gone up onto the bank's roof and tried to slide down the narrow chimney feet first. The pipe narrowed at the bottom, trapping his arms and pinning him. The bank sealed off the chimney from the outside later that decade, completely unaware that he was inside. So day-to-day life went on for nearly 3 decades at that bank, with staff and customers completely unaware there was a dead body inside the chimney. You probably heard some version of this next one. A woman is driving home late at night when a car starts following her. The driver behind her keeps flashing their headlights, riding her bumper. Terrified, she thinks she's being stalked. She finally races to a gas station or a police station, only to discover the person following her was actually the one trying to save her, because there's someone hiding in her back seat. It sounds like a classic campfire story, but versions of this have happened in real life. One of the best documented cases happened in 1964 in New York. A police officer noticed a vehicle driving a bit erratically, repeatedly flashed his lights to get the driver to pull over. When the car finally stopped, the officer approached and discovered a man crouched on the floor in the rear of the vehicle holding a blade. The suspect had apparently slipped into the car unnoticed while it was parked. Over the years, police departments across North America have reported similar incidents, intruders hiding in people's vehicles, so always check your back seat before getting in your car. Another conspiracy has to do with the KGB. The idea is that they wanted to sabotage Reactor 4 to scare other countries away from building their own nuclear power plants. The goal? To monopolize Europe's energy market entirely. The thinking goes like this: if Chernobyl created massive fear about nuclear energy, countries in Western and Central Europe would maybe think twice before investing in their own nuclear facilities. With limited energy sources in Europe, the KGB figured that if they could make these countries dependent on Soviet oil and gas, they'd be in a position of power. Of course, if you're going to look at the KGB having something to do with the incident, it's only natural for others to speculate about the US government as well. Ever since the disaster took place in 1986, there were suspicions that the CIA might have had something to do with it, which is not surprising in the slightest. This one's pretty obvious. The idea is that the CIA orchestrated the explosion at Reactor 4 to create fear around nuclear energy and destabilize the USSR's influence. It was a tense period of time for the Soviets and the United States, and by creating a catastrophic event like this, the CIA could not only undermine the Soviet government's credibility, but also discourage other nations from developing nuclear power themselves, giving them the edge in the global energy market. Some were also highly skeptical of the rapid response of the US, thinking that they could have had a prior knowledge of the disaster. Now into more paranormal stuff. Like with any ghost town, especially one abandoned for such a tragic reason, ghost stories are plentiful. The amusement park has to be one of the eeriest spots in Pripyat. It was built just days before the disaster. It was meant to be a place of fun for families, but that never came to be. Sadly, it was never officially opened to the public, but legend has it that if you happen to be exploring Pripyat late at night, you may hear the faint sounds of laughter and music coming from the park. Visitors have reported strange occurrences while exploring. Some people say that when they approach the bumper cars, they can faintly hear the sounds of engines starting. Another creepy part about the park, and really the whole town itself, are the dolls scattered throughout it. Dolls that were left behind, now left to decay. Some believe that these dolls, especially those found in the carousel area, have taken on a life of their own. People have claimed that the dolls seem to change positions or appear in places they weren't before, but the giant rusted Ferris wheel is the most recognizable sight in the park. Some have said that when the wind blows, the wheel creaks and groans, sounding almost like whispers. It's not just the amusement park that's said to be haunted though. Urban explorers have reported seeing dark figures darting between buildings all throughout the city of Pripyat, especially in the empty schools and hospitals. Could these shadowy figures be the spirits of those who died in the disaster, still trapped in the abandoned city they once lived and worked in, forever doomed to roam the desolate streets? Some will say they've seen unexplained silhouettes peering out at them from corners of rooms or appearing just out of the corner of their eye. But are there actually shadowy entities trapped in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, or could people just be seeing things, either from psyching themselves out or having actual illusions brought on by the radioactivity? Now, the Black Bird of Chernobyl is probably the eeriest urban legend surrounding the Chernobyl disaster. The Black Bird of Chernobyl is a creepy urban legend that's come about in the years since the nuclear disaster in '86, but residents claimed to have seen the creature in the days leading up to it. It's often described as a big, dark figure, an enormous black owl or raven-looking thing. People claim to have spotted it flying around the Chernobyl power plant in the days leading up to the explosion. Not only that, but residents began having these horrific, vivid nightmares about it after spotting it. So what was this thing and why was it there? Well, the main theory is that the creature was an entity acting as a bad omen, a warning of the disaster to come. Very similar to Mothman showing up in the Silver Bridge right before it collapsed. Some even think the Blackbird of Chernobyl and Mothman are the exact same creature. Hanako-san is one of the first ghost stories Japanese kids ever hear, which might be why it never really leaves them. She's said to haunt school bathrooms, usually on the 3rd floor, 3rd stall. Knock 3 times and ask if she's there. Sometimes she answers, sometimes she comes out. The details change depending on the area. In some versions she's harmless, in others she drags people into the toilet, where they're never seen again. As for her origin story, some say she died in World War II during air raids while hiding in the school. Another version says she was being followed by a man, and the bathroom is where she was hiding when she was killed. There's something so unsettling about the idea of a ghost haunting a bathroom stall. I think it's the vulnerability of it, when you're literally being caught with your pants down. Back in the late 70s, people in Japan weren't just talking about this one, they were scared enough that schools sent kids home in groups, and police departments made public statements about it. Kuchisaki Onna, or the slit-mouthed woman. The story goes like this. A woman approaches you in the street, usually wearing a surgical mask. She asks, "Am I pretty?" If you say no, she ends your life on the spot. If you say yes, she removes the mask and reveals the torn smile, sometimes lined with sharp teeth, and asks again, "Even now?" Say no or scream and you're dead. Say yes and she cuts your mouth to match hers. Some say she used to be a beautiful woman who was attacked by her jealous sister. Other versions say it was a botched cosmetic or dental procedure. Next up we have the Red Room Curse. This one became popular on Japanese message boards in the early 2000s. The setup is always the same. You're using your computer late at night and a red pop-up window appears. It asks, "Do you like the Red Room?" You can't close it. No matter what you do, it stays. And then a voice starts listing names. As it goes on, the screen fills with red. According to the story, the final name is yours. And after that, you're found dead in a room covered in BLOOD. Now, what pushed this beyond just an internet scare was a real case in 2004. A schoolgirl, simply referred to as Girl A to the media, took the life of a classmate and later talked about being obsessed with the Red Room story. So, news coverage at the time tied the two together. There's a stretch of mountains in Fukuoka where there's said to be a hidden village known as Inunaki. You're driving through the mountains, following narrow roads when your phone signal fades. Somewhere near the old Inunaki tunnel, there's a small side road, and that road is where the legend of Inunaki village begins. People who claim to have found it describe a handwritten sign near the entrance, which says the Japanese constitution does not apply beyond this point. According to the story, the people living there reject the government entirely. There are no police, no laws. Once you pass the sign, you're on your own. One of the earliest stories places the origin in the early 70s. A young couple driving toward Hisayama had their car break down and went into the forest looking for help. They came across a quiet village, so quiet it almost looked abandoned. But then an old man popped out of a house, attacking them with a sickle. Another version centers on a telephone booth near Inunaki Bridge. Supposedly it rings late at night. The call always comes from Inunaki Village. People who answer are said to be drawn there and cursed. First they lose control of their thoughts, then their body follows. Now what keeps this legend alive is the real place around it. There was a real village, founded in 1691 and later abandoned and submerged during the construction of the Inunaki Dam. Nearby is the old Inunaki Tunnel, sealed after a man was burned alive inside it in 1988. Next up is Teke Teke. Most versions of this story start the same way. The kid is walking home after dark, maybe near train tracks, usually near train tracks, but maybe cutting through a quiet street they've taken 100 times before, when they hear something behind them. It's not footsteps, something dragging. Teke Teke is said to be the ghost of a schoolgirl who fell onto train tracks and was cut in half instead of dying, and then she just crawls around using her arms, pulling herself along the ground. The sound she makes while moving is where the name comes from, a hard, scraping noise that gets closer and closer no matter how fast you walk. If she catches you, she kills you the same way. And she doesn't get tired. Running doesn't help. Hiding doesn't work either, because once she's noticed you, she always knows where you are. The story spread through schools for years, especially in areas with busy train lines. And finally, we have Akamanto. Most versions put him in school bathrooms, usually the girls' room, the last stall at the far wall. You're on the toilet when you hear him, a calm voice that asks a simple question: red paper or blue paper? If you look up, he's standing there wearing a red cloak and a mask that hides his face. If you pick red, you die violently, slashed and flayed. If you pick blue, you're strangled until you turn blue and collapse. And if you try to be clever, asking for a different color, he drags you away somewhere, never to be seen again. Some say you're pulled straight into hell. The only way out, according to the stories, is to refuse the game. So, say you don't want either. Don't answer, just get up and leave.
There is a stretch of road near Monterey that locals avoid after midnight. Drivers report their engines stalling, radios turning on by themselves, and a tall figure appearing in the road ahead. The legend says this road was built over land used for executions during the Mexican Revolution. Prisoners were lined up and shot, their bodies buried where they fell. In the 1970s, several fatal accidents occurred on that same stretch. Survivors claimed they swerved to avoid hitting a man who suddenly appeared in front of their vehicle, a man who vanished the moment they crashed. Traffic authorities installed lighting and signage, but accidents continued. Eventually, locals named it El Camino del Diablo. Taxi drivers still refuse late-night fares that require using that road. The legend says he looks like a gentleman, but if you accept his help, you pay for it. El Charro is one of Mexico's most recognizable night road legends. He appears as a tall, elegant man in a perfect black suit, usually riding a massive black horse. He shows up when you are alone, tired, broke, desperate, or all of the above, and he offers exactly what you want: a ride home, money, a shortcut, a job, relief. But the deal is never free. In many versions, El Charro is tied to the devil, or at least to a force that functions like it. He is not just a scary rider, he is a test. The greedy, the reckless, and the people who make desperate bargains are the ones who end up in trouble. This is why the legend is so Mexican in its cultural bones. The Charro is a national symbol. The horseman should represent pride, skill, tradition. The legend flips it and says sometimes the most familiar outfit is the best disguise. The dark origin here is not just religion, it is the reality of travel. For centuries, roads at night were dangerous. Bandits, accidents, getting lost, getting stranded. If a stranger offered you help, you had to make a choice fast, and if you chose wrong, you might not make it home. El Charro is basically that decision turned into a character, and the detail people love adding is the moment the mask slips. Sometimes you see his boots and they're not boots. Sometimes you notice his horse is too tall, too still, like it's carved out of shadow. Sometimes you realize you cannot remember where you first saw him, and the moment you say yes, the legend says you stop being a person on a road. You become a lesson. The worst part about a Nahual is not what it turns into, it's that it might already be someone you know. This is one of the deepest, oldest ideas in Mesoamerican belief. Depending on the region and the version, these can be a human with a spiritual animal companion, or a person who can transform into an animal, or a ritual specialist feared for being able to harm or heal in ways that feel impossible. In rural storytelling, these people are often blamed when something weird happens at night. Strange animal sounds that feel too intelligent, a dog that stares too long, a turkey that follows you, a coyote that does not run when you shout. The legend fills in the gap and says that this is not an animal, that is a person wearing an animal. Colonial records and scholarship show that belief in these shape-shifting accusations were taken seriously enough to be discussed in legal and religious contexts. This was not just campfire material. It tied into fears about idolatry, witchcraft accusations, and community conflict. So the legend has layers. There is a shop window in Chihuahua where people don't just look at the mannequin. They stare like they're waiting for proof. La Pascualita is a legendary bridal mannequin displayed in Chihuahua, famous for looking so lifelike that people swear it cannot be a mannequin. The legend claims it is actually a preserved human body placed in the window after a tragedy. That claim has never been proven, and that uncertainty is part of why the story keeps breathing. In this case, the detail is in the hands. People talk about the skin tone, the nails, the realism. Some say the eyes even look wet. Others claim she changes position slightly, or that the staff refuse to touch her directly when they change the dress. So if you visit, the legend says you do not tap the glass, you do not joke about her, and if you think she blinked, you do not tell anyone you were alone when it happened. Imagine waking up in a hospital at night and the kindest nurse you've ever met is someone no one else can find. La Planchada is a famous Mexico City hospital legend often linked to Hospital Juarez. She is described as a nurse with an impeccably pressed uniform who appears late at night, checks on patients, brings comfort, and then vanishes before anyone can thank her. There are many versions of her backstory, but the common thread is heartbreak and duty. A nurse who was devoted to her work, who experienced betrayal or loss, and who returned after death still doing what she believed she was born to do. Mexican media retellings openly describe it as legend, and the story persists in part because hospitals are the perfect environment for it. The dark origin here is human. Hospitals at night are lonely. People are afraid, staff are exhausted, patients are half asleep, medicated, and disoriented, and sometimes a stranger really does help you, but you never learn their name. That's the real-life gap the legend crawls into.
For those who grew up in Staten Island, the story of Cropsey was a pretty common campfire tale. He was a boogeyman with a hook for a hand who'd supposedly escaped from an asylum and lived in the old abandoned tunnels beneath the Willowbrook State School, waiting to snatch kids who wandered too far. Most people thought it was just a way to keep kids from playing in the woods, but in the 70s and 80s, children actually started vanishing. The monster turned out to be a man named Andre Rand. He wasn't a supernatural entity, he was worse, a real man. He was a former janitor at Willowbrook who stayed on the grounds after the school was shut down. He was living in a makeshift campsite right in the middle of those woods. In 1987, a search party finally found the remains of a young girl buried just a few yards from where Rand was living. Turned out he really was using that tunnel system from the legends to move around the island undetected. The hook hand, that was made up, but the man living in the ruins of an asylum was terrifyingly real. There's an old story that sometimes the props you see in carnival haunted houses, either skeletons or mummies hanging from the ceilings, aren't actually made of plastic or wax. The rumor was that some cash-strapped carnivals used real human remains because they were cheaper than professional props back in the day. Well, in 1976, a camera crew was filming at a funhouse in Long Beach, California. They tried to move a wax mannequin that was hanging from a noose, and when the arm snapped off, they saw actual human bone. It wasn't a prop. It was the body of Elmer McCurdy, an outlaw who died in a 1911 shootout. Because no one claimed him, an undertaker mummified him and started renting him out to carnivals. And for 60 years, his body was passed around from sideshows to wax museums, with owners eventually forgetting the mummy had actually been a real person. By the time he was found, he'd been covered in neon orange paint. He was finally given a proper burial in Oklahoma with a massive block of concrete poured over his casket to make sure he'd never become a prop again. For decades, people in western Pennsylvania told stories about the Green Man or Charlie No Face. The legend went that a glowing, faceless man haunted a specific railroad tunnel at night. It was said that he was radioactive or electrical, and if you got too close, he'd stall your car engine. The legend was actually based on a real man named Raymond Robinson. When he was 9, he was severely disfigured in a massive electrical accident that cost him his nose, his eyes, and one of his arms. Raymond was actually said to be a very kind-hearted guy, but he only felt comfortable going out for walks in the middle of the night. He didn't want to frighten people with his appearance, and he did not want the attention. But teens would drive out specifically to try and spot him after stories started to spread. In reality, the glow people reported was just the reflection of their own headlights off his skin. He wasn't a monster at all. He was just a guy who'd survived a tragedy and wanted to enjoy the night air in peace. Passed away in 1985. This next one's a pretty common trope, finding a dead body under a mattress. A couple checks into a hotel, notices a nasty odor in the room, and complains to the staff. Staff come to check, but the room seems fine. Well, after a night of sleeping on the bed, they finally lift the mattress to find a decomposing body hidden inside the bed frame. It sounds like a horror movie scene, but it actually has happened. dozens of times. There have been cases in cities like Las Vegas and Atlantic City, and in one 1999 case in Colorado Springs, a couple actually slept on a bed for 3 nights. They'd noticed an off smell though, and the hotel staff had been trying to cover it up with air freshener. When the staff finally checked, they found that the wooden base of the bed had been hollowed out to hide the body of a woman who'd been missing for over a week. And again, that's just one example. There are tons of horror stories like this. Criminals had frequently used this tactic because they know hotel staff rarely lift the heavy mattresses during a standard cleaning. It's the reason most modern hotels have switched to solid platform beds. Anyway, moral of the story, trust your nose. Also, don't kill people and hide them in hotel beds, but I think that's obvious. We're all familiar with the ghost stories surrounding mirrors, mainly Bloody Mary. The 1992 movie Candyman also played with this idea. There's actually a real case that was the direct inspiration for the movie. It happened in a Chicago housing project in 1987. A woman named Ruthie Mae McCoy called the police, terrified because someone was trying to come through her medicine cabinet. It sounded pretty far-fetched, obviously. Ruthie also had a bit of a history of paranoia, so when the officers didn't find any signs of a break-in at the front door, they left. Well, a few days later, she was found dead. The investigation revealed there was a massive flaw in these apartments. The medicine cabinets in those buildings were built back to back, so all anyone needed to do was unscrew their cabinet and they could climb through the wall and step right into their neighbor's bathroom. People had been using these mirror doors to move between apartments and commit robberies, and worse, for months. Sticking with Scotland, since the 70s, kids in Greenock would tell stories about a half-man, half-cat creature with glowing eyes and pure black skin that hid under cars and in bushes at night, catching rats and eating them raw. The story said he lived among a pack of wild cats, looked after them, and at some point stopped thinking of himself as a person. Now, where it actually came from, supposedly, is a really sad story. Catman was originally a Russian sailor who jumped ship at Greenock Harbor in the 70s, apparently because of mental health problems, and he had conflicts with the rest of the crew. He ended up stranded, begging on the streets. At some point, a group of local teens found him and beat him so badly that he broke both his legs and his jaw. He couldn't walk upright again, and the damage to his jaw left him unable to speak properly. He refused to go to hospitals or shelters though, wouldn't let anyone help him, and ended up just living on the street, dragging himself along on his stomach. He slept under parked cars and buses for warmth, and from crawling around under vehicles constantly, his skin and clothes became completely black with motor oil. There have been lots of photos shared online that are supposedly real sightings of him. Some are probably dudes cosplaying, but locals have said they've seen the guy in real life. Next up, we have the legend of the Black Volga. The legend spread all across Poland, Romania, and Czechoslovakia during the Cold War. A sleek black Volga car with white rims and curtained windows cruises the streets of cities like Warsaw and Prague at night. The driver, depending on who's telling it, either is a vampire, a Satanist, or just straight up the devil, rolls down the window and asks someone for the time, and then they're gone. Some stories went that the victim's organs were being harvested. Pretty insane story. I mean, how could there be any truth to this? Well, the Gaz-21 Volga was an extremely expensive car in the Soviet bloc. Basically, no ordinary person could own one. They were handed out almost exclusively to senior Communist Party members and the secret police, the KGB. And those exact black cars really did pull up to the curb in the middle of the night and take people. People who said the wrong thing to the wrong person. People someone powerful wanted gone. They'd be bundled into one of those cars and vanish into the prison system, and that would be the last anyone heard of them. At some point, the real story mutated into a ghost story about vampires and organ harvesting, probably because talking openly about what those black cars actually meant could get you put inside one. The supernatural version was just safer to repeat. The story goes there's some hidden city buried in the Italian mountains where thousands of people live in ancient caves completely cut off from the modern world. It wasn't a legend. Matera is a city in southern Italy. It's one of the oldest places on the planet. People have been continuously living it. People there didn't just live near caves, they carved their homes directly into the cliffs. And families have been doing that for thousands of years. By the 30s and 40s, the Italian government found that over 15,000 people were living in those caves, but it wasn't ideal. They had no electricity, no running water, no ventilation. Infant mortality was also high because livestock were living in the caves too, and disease just easily spread. In 1952, the prime minister at the time called Matera a national shame. The government moved everyone out of the caves and into proper housing. The cave city sat completely empty for decades after that, and now it's a tourist destination. This next story goes that a man films his exploration of the forbidden, unmapped sections of the Paris catacombs, gets completely turned around, starts panicking, drops the camera, and runs off into the dark. In 2005, a group of urban explorers found an abandoned camera sitting in a remote tunnel deep in the system. The footage on it is basically the story I just told you. A man filming himself moving through tight, flooded passages. Then the moment he realizes that he has no idea where he is, his breathing changes, he starts moving faster, more erratically, then runs, turns corners into total darkness, the camera hits the ground, and he doesn't come back for it. French authorities were never able to figure out who the man was, and there's still no definitive answer as to whether the guy made it out alive or if the video's even real. I mean, it exists, but people say it could have been staged. What is absolutely true, though, is that people do get lost in the catacombs, and some never make it out alive. The forbidden sections of the catacombs are patrolled as heavily as they are because people get lost and die in there fairly frequently. The tunnel system runs for about 200 miles under Paris, but a huge portion of it has never been properly mapped. It's said there are people living in the abandoned sections of the London Underground, descendants of Victorian-era construction workers who got trapped during the building of the tunnels and never made it out. They supposedly survived down there for generations by hunting rats and grabbing the occasional late-night commuter. Now, obviously, this is quite an exaggeration, but the real history is genuinely strange. During the Blitz in World War II, massive numbers of Londoners had to shelter in the tube stations every single night to survive the bombing. When the war ended, not everyone went back up. Some people had no home to go back to, so they stayed in the deep tunnels and the closed-off platforms. These people learned the tunnel system completely and survived on food scraps that fell onto the tracks. I'm sure some went up for food, but then would just come back down to live down there. Maintenance workers doing overnight shifts would come around a corner and just run straight into someone who'd been living down there for years. Nobody knew exactly how many people were doing it or how long some of them had been underground, but people sheltering underground in the subway is not unheard of.
In the late 1990s, people across Mexico started waking up to dead livestock, and one name spread faster than any explanation: chupacabras. El Chupacabras is a modern Mexican urban legend powerhouse. The name and earliest wave of reports are often traced back to Puerto Rico in 1995, but the legend rapidly spread into Mexico and became part of rural and national conversation. The classic story is always the same shape. Animals are found dead with strange puncture marks. People say there's no blood. People say the creature was seen near the pen moving weird with spines, or like a hairless dog, or like something that shouldn't exist. Then the fear multiplies because nobody agrees on what it looked like, only that it was there. What makes this a true urban legend is how it behaves socially. It spreads through communities as a warning, it creates a shared enemy, it gives a label to something frightening and unexplained, and even today major references describe it as folklore, while also noting that later sightings are often explained by animals with severe mange or other diseases. And here is the final creepy detail that people swear by. They say the chupacabras doesn't just take animals, it takes sleep. Because once you believe it's out there, you start listening at night for every sound in the brush, every rustle, every distant bark, and your mind just does the rest. In Durango, there's an old legend of a bride who appears near abandoned churches. Witnesses describe a woman in a wedding dress standing silently by the roadside. When approached, her face is smooth and blank, like skin stretched over nothing. The legend originates from reports in the early 1900s of a woman who died waiting for a groom who never arrived. She was buried in her wedding dress. Travelers claimed encounters for decades. Several car accidents were attributed to drivers swerving to avoid her, and whether psychological or something else, the consistency of reports across generations makes this one of Mexico's most persistent forgotten legends. If you see a doll hanging from a tree in Xochimilco, it might not be there to scare you. It might be there as an offering. The canals of Xochimilco are part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site tied to the historic center of Mexico City, with the Chinampa landscape recognized for its cultural significance. Within the real protected environment, there is a place that became globally infamous, Isla de las Muñecas, the island of the dolls. The verified core is that a man lived and worked in the area and became associated with an island covered in dolls over many years. Accounts of how and why vary, and that is where the legend takes over. Many tell it's a response to a drowned young person. Some versions claim his own death mirrored that story. The urban legend is that the dolls move, blink, or whisper, especially when the wind changes. Some say you should bring a doll if you visit, not as a souvenir, but as respect. And here is the dark origin. Even if you remove the paranormal, this is an environment shaped by tradition and survival, and a man's private fears or grief became a public spectacle. People call it haunted because that is easier than saying a person spent decades building a protective wall out of broken vases. Some museums feel educational. This one feels like you've accidentally walked into a room where the dead were not done being looked at. Guanajuato's famous mummies are real human remains, many dating back to the 1800s, preserved by local conditions and later displayed. Even in modern reporting, the key facts repeat. Bodies were exhumed after burial fees went unpaid, the remains were displayed for decades, and there are ongoing disputes over handling, conservation, and who should control them. That modern controversy matters because it feeds the legend. The urban myth says some of the mummies screamed when exhumed, and that a curse follows people who mock them or treat them like props. A lot of this likely comes from the unsettling appearance of naturally preserved bodies and the way tourism can blur into disrespect. The factual dark origin is not magic. It is economics, burial policy, and the ethics of display. When you put real human remains behind glass for entertainment, people will reach for supernatural language to explain the discomfort they cannot otherwise name. Mexico is famous for its Day of the Dead celebrations, but locals also speak of something else. According to legend, certain graves are guarded by spirits who do not appreciate visitors after dark. People who entered the cemetery late reported being chased out by unseen forces. Some claimed hands grabbed their ankles, others said the exits moved, trapping them inside. In the 1980s, police records note multiple injuries caused by falls and panic inside the cemetery at night. While authorities blame alcohol and poor lighting, residents insisted something else was at work. Even during celebrations, locals warn outsiders to leave before midnight.
For 27 years, people living around North Pond, Maine told stories about a mountain man or a ghost that lived in the woods. He was blamed for thousands of tiny thefts, food, batteries, and propane, but he was never seen, never left footprints, and seemed to vanish into thin air. A lot of people thought he was just a myth, but in 2013, the so-called ghost was finally caught on a trail camera. His name was Christopher Knight. He'd walked in the woods in 1986 at the age of 20 and stayed there for nearly 3 decades without ever talking to another human being. He lived in a tiny camouflaged tent site just a few hundred yards from the cabins that he was raiding. He survived the freezing Maine winters by wrapping himself in stolen sleeping bags and never lighting a fire because he knew the smoke would give him away. He wasn't some ghostly entity, but there really was a guy living right in people's backyards for 27 years without anyone ever seeing his face. In 1983, the video game industry crashed so hard that Atari was stuck with millions of copies of the E.T. game, which was considered the worst game ever made. Legend said that to hide their shame and the massive financial loss, they drove a fleet of trucks into the New Mexico desert in the middle of the night and buried the games in a secret mass grave under a layer of concrete. It's a pretty ridiculous story. Unfortunately, real life is not a sitcom, so this has to be a tall tale, or at best an exaggeration, right? For 30 years, that's what people thought. But in 2014, a documentary crew got permission to dig up an old landfill in Alamogordo. After hours of digging, they hit a layer of crushed plastic and cardboard and started pulling out hundreds of intact ET cartridges. The graveyard was real. Atari had been so overwhelmed by retailers returning the games that they literally could not store them all, so they decided to just bury their shame. In the 1940s, a phantom was said to be stalking a small town in Illinois. Legend described a tall, thin man in dark clothes who would spray a sweet-smelling gas through open bedroom windows. leaving his victims paralyzed and nauseated before vanishing into the night. This started in September 1944. And the panic was so intense that the town of Mattoon was put under armed patrol. A lot of people dismiss this story as mass hysteria caused by the stress of the war, but there were physical details that didn't really fit that theory. Some victims had real symptoms like swollen lips and chemical burns, and police found window screens that had been cut on the outside. Whether it was actually an attacker with knowledge of chemistry or maybe a leak from a nearby plant, there's definitely some truth to the Mad Gasser story. And, let's be real, compared to most urban legends, this one really isn't that far-fetched. There's a common horror trope about an eccentric man who lives alone in a house filled with life-size dolls. The legend says he treats them like they're alive, but the neighbors swear that the dolls look too realistic, almost like they're made of real skin. In 2011, a case unraveled that has to be one of the creepiest in Russia. Anatoly Moskvin was a seemingly regular guy. Actually, he was a brilliant historian, a successful, learned man. So when police found out that a series of grave robberies led back to him, they were pretty surprised. And that shock turned to total revulsion when they entered his apartment to find 29 life-size dolls dressed in stockings and dresses. They weren't actually dolls, though. Moskvin had spent years digging up the remains of young girls from local cemeteries. He'd mummified them using salt and baking soda, stuffed them with padding, and even installed music boxes inside their chests so they would sing when he touched them. Gave them all names and threw birthday parties for them, treated them like they were alive. One of the creepiest stories I've ever heard, I think. This is one of the oldest fears in the world, that someone could be mistakenly declared dead, buried, and then wake up in total darkness, clawing at the inside of their coffin. One of my biggest fears, I think. That's why I don't want to be buried in a coffin at all. Send my body out into space, just let me drift into a black hole or something. Sounds doable. Anyway, the legend says that when old cemeteries are moved, workers sometimes find scratch marks in the inside of the lids. Well, in the 19th century, this was actually a very real risk. Before modern technology, doctors sometimes had a hard time telling the difference between a deep coma and death. This fear was so common that people invented safety coffins with bells and air tubes. One documented case from 1891 involves a woman named Octavia Hatcher. She was buried but wasn't actually dead. She'd just been unresponsive. She'd suffered some sort of mysterious sleeping sickness. Basically, she was in a coma. Well, when several other people in the town caught the same sleeping sickness and eventually woke up, her husband was like, oh my god, and he had her exhumed. And when they opened the coffin, they found the inner lining shredded and Octavia's fingernails raw from her frantically trying to crawl her way out. Terrifying indeed. Most people know this as a fairy tale. A piper gets hired to clear a town of rats. The town refuses to pay him, and he gets revenge by playing his flute and leading all the children away. But on June 26, 1284, 130 children actually vanished from a real town called Hemlin in Germany. The town was so destroyed by this that they actually started measuring time from that day forward. Their official records would say things like 100 years since our children left. That was how badly it wrecked them. Now, when historians went back and looked at the oldest written accounts, the rats weren't mentioned. That rat story got added on later. The original records are just about the kids disappearing. Now, what probably happened is that a recruiter showed up in town, someone outgoing and persuasive, wearing bright, flashy clothes, which is how recruiters dressed back then to stand out. And they would have talked the town's young people into leaving. Times were hard, and these recruiters, called locators, would go from town to town promising land or work in places like Eastern Europe or Transylvania. Young people followed him out, and they would have never come back. That's the theory, anyway. You probably heard some version of this one. A woman gets buried wearing a valuable ring. That night, grave robbers dig her up to sell it. When they try to cut the ring off her swollen finger, the pain wakes her up. Turns out she wasn't dead, just in a coma. Well, that actually happened. Her name was Marjorie McCall, and it was 1705 in Lurgan, Northern Ireland. She got very sick, was declared dead, and was quickly buried to stop whatever illness she had from spreading to the rest of town. That same night, grave robbers came for her wedding ring. When they cut her finger to try and get it off, the pain snapped her out of it. She climbed out of the grave herself, walked all the way back home, and knocked on her own front door in the middle of the night. Her husband, who thought that she was dead, reportedly fainted on the spot when he opened the door. She lived for years after that though, and if you go to Shankill Cemetery today, her gravestone is still there, which reads, Marjorie McCall, lived once, buried twice. If someone told you there was a creature made up of a dozen rats physically fused together into one giant writhing mass, you'd probably assume it was some old medieval legend. Well, for centuries, people across Germany and other parts of Europe told stories about something called a rat king, a group of rats whose tails had become tangled together into a single knot. According to the legend, the animals were permanently trapped, forced to move and survive as this one creature. It sounded pretty bizarre. Most people wrote it off as pure folklore, but this is actually a thing, as revolting as it sounds. One of the most famous was discovered in Germany in 1828. Consisted of 32 black rats whose tails were bound together in a large knot. Other Rat King specimens have been found over the years as well. Some are still preserved in museums today. The legend is a giant wolf, basically indestructible, stalks the forests of France, hunting people. Doesn't go for livestock, it specifically targets humans. Basically, it's a werewolf. The real version isn't far off. Between 1764 and 1767, something was killing people in a region of southern France called Gévaudan, mostly women and children. The death toll climbed to somewhere around 100. Got so bad that King Louis XV personally sent in royal troops and hired professional hunters to deal with the thing. In 1767, a man named Jean Chastel shot and killed a large animal. When they opened its stomach, they found human remains inside. Modern zoologists think it was probably an abnormally large wolf-dog hybrid, possibly something like a hyena that had escaped from a traveling animal show. Whatever it actually was, it was real, it was big, and it had been eating people for 3 years before it was finally put down. The legend says that during plague outbreaks, city officials in Edinburgh, Scotland, walled up entire alleyways with sick people still inside, leaving them to die in the dark. The walling up story is exaggerated, but what's actually under Edinburgh is real. Beneath the streets, there's a completely intact 17th century neighborhood called Mary King's Close. When the city decided to build something called the Royal Exchange in the 1700s, they didn't demolish the old buildings that were in the way. Instead, they just cut the tops off the houses and built the new structure directly on top of them. The old streets became the foundation. The whole neighborhood ended up sealed underground, this dark maze of rooms and alleyways sitting under the city. Those streets were already badly hit by the plague of 1645. The city didn't trap people alive down there on purpose, but it did quarantine the abandoned lower levels during the outbreak, and then later just built over the top of everything. It's open to tourists today. Coming off the list at number 10 with the Jenny. The Jenny was an English ship that left port on the Isle of Wight in 1822. Now, there isn't a whole lot of detail as to what happened to the ship, as the story has been around for years but has never been 100% verified. At some point during the journey though, the ship became trapped in ice somewhere in the Drake Passage, about a year after they set sail. The ship wasn't discovered though until 1840 by a Captain Brighton on a whaling ship called Hope. On the frozen Jenny were supposedly the bodies of the crew members, eerily well preserved because of the cold, frozen climate. And the captain's last log entry had been made on January 17th of 1823. Some stories go that Brighton's crew was then haunted by the ghosts of the Jenny, even seeing a ghostly image of the ship appear at night floating through the ocean. And at number 9, we have the Ningen. Cryptid time! Love my monsters. The Ningen is a cryptid that originates from Japanese folklore and modern urban legends. The term Ningen translates to human being in Japanese, but when used in the context of the cryptid, it refers to a mysterious and humanoid sea creature reported to inhabit the icy waters of the Antarctic. There are a couple different physical descriptions of the creature, but common features include a humanoid shape with a head, a torso, and like these long legs. Sometimes there's flippers involved. It's often large in size, around 20 to 30 meters in length. The Ningen is said to have smooth, pale, and rubbery skin, kind of like a beluga whale. Some accounts mention facial features, eyes, a mouth, while others describe it being completely faceless. The Ningen started circulating online in the mid-2000s when reports and alleged eyewitness accounts started being reported on the Japanese online forum website 2channel. These reports often claimed sightings by crew members of Japanese whaling vessels and fishermen in the Antarctic region. At number 8, we have the secret German base. So there's been this legend floating around for decades that the German forces set up this secretive military base in the frozen hell that is Antarctica, concealing themselves away from the prying eyes of the public in order to carry out advanced technological experiments and tests, or search for mystical artifacts that could aid them in their evil conquest. The idea that the SS were secretly experimenting with advanced technologies and high-tech weapons, or trying to find ancient, powerful artifacts buried deep beneath the icy wilderness of Antarctica is pretty insane, but I mean, so was the SS. The idea isn't even that they actually accomplished anything, just that there's a possibility that they tried. There are also some conspiracy theorists who believe that they discovered ancient alien technology buried in the ice, leading to secret research projects that may have even continued after the end of the war. Others believe that Antarctica could have been a refuge for Mr. H, a place where his dream of creating a superhuman Aryan race could continue in isolation. Continuing along with the whole World War II secret base legend, let's talk about the possible destruction of this said German base. After the war in 1946 and 47, the US sent this huge fleet to Antarctica, and what were they doing? Never been 100% verified, kept mostly secret from the public. So there are those that believe that they'd been tasked with destroying this secret German base. Now, this would have been a pretty easy mission, right? The war was won, base was totally free of any soldiers, just fly on over there and blow it up. Could have definitely been the case, but if we're talking about the fact that maybe there were Germans still there long after the war, then this, would have been a much tougher mission. So, I don't know. Maybe nothing happened. Probably nothing happened. I probably sound incredibly insane right now, but I mean, it's fun to imagine these things, right? Number 6, Lake Vostok. Lake Vostok, hiding beneath Antarctica's icy surface, is a massive subglacial lake that's captured the imagination of scientists and conspiracy theorists for years. It's been locked away for millions of years. It's one of the largest lakes of its kind on Earth. And what's so intriguing about it is, of course, the isolation. What kind of life could be down there? Some scientists speculate about the possibility of discovering new species of fish and other unknown life forms. There have also been strange radar readings that could point to anomalies beneath the ice. The wilder conspiracy theories, of course, involve an ancient civilization of some kind lost under the ice, but no one's drilled all the way through the ice to take a peek. So some say it's because of the risk of maybe contaminating whatever could be down there, seeing as it's been locked away for so long. But others think maybe there's just something they're not telling us, government cover-up type stuff. But what do you think? As always, share your thoughts down in the comments. Next on the list, we have the haunting of Deception Island. Deception Island kind of looks like a frozen hellscape. It used to be the site of several whaling stations that have long since been abandoned. The whaling operations were established in the early 20th century, and a Norwegian-Chilean whaling station named Hector was operational on the island until the Great Depression forced it to close. During World War II, the British established a military presence on Deception Island named Operation Tabarin. The island was a monitoring and control point to counter potential German activity in Antarctica, and after the war, the station was turned over to civilian use for scientific research. Some visitors and researchers have reported strange occurrences and ghostly sightings on the island. One of the most well-known stories is about the British research station called Base B, which operated on the island in the late 1940s. According to the legend, the research station was abandoned abruptly because of unexplained and mysterious incidents. Some versions of the story claim that the researchers started seeing paranormal stuff going on, leading them to flee the station in horror.
Starting us off today, we have the legends of the Romblon Triangle, which is, as the name implies, the Philippines version of the Bermuda Triangle, located between the islands of Mindoro, the Dos Hermanas, and the Sibuyan Islands within the Romblon province. Of course, much like the Bermuda Triangle, the Romblon Triangle has been the site of many strange disappearances throughout the years, including the world's worst non-war related maritime disaster, in which the merchant vessel Donna Paz inexplicably inexplicably collided with an oil tanker in 1987. The bizarre, seemingly avoidable disaster cost the lives of all 4,000 individuals aboard the ships, which promptly sank into the ocean after colliding with one another. Prior to this event, another vessel, the merchant vessel Don Juan, sank, ending the lives of 176 passengers, and many years later in 2008, the merchant vessel Princess of the Stars capsized, killing 118 passengers out of 151. So what caused this? Whether improper planning, or perhaps, as the legend goes, a mythical creature residing in the heart of the Romblon that lurks in the shadows and attacks the ships of sailors who make the mistake of crossing the passage at night. But who really knows?
Next up, we have the tale of the jeepney ride. So jeepneys are the primary source of public transportation in the Philippines. They're basically a cross between a jeep and a minibus, and they're covered with like all these colorful decorations. They look really fun. If you've ever been on one, let me know what it's actually like riding in one. So, like with any urban legend, there are different versions, but it usually goes something like this. A young woman is leaving work late. Luckily, there's a jeepney outside and she hops in. She's the only passenger. She minds her own business, listening to music or whatever, but she soon notices that the driver is glaring at her through the rear view mirror. He looks away when they lock eyes, but every time she looks back up again, he's staring. She starts getting uncomfortable at this point, but luckily, she's just about made it to her destination. She goes to get off the jeepney when suddenly the driver takes off. Panicked, she yells at the guy to stop, that she wants to get off, but he just keeps driving. At this point, she thinks she's going to die. She can't jump off the thing either because they're going way too fast. But then the jeepney screeches to a halt. The woman opens her eyes. They're back at her stop. She goes to hop off the vehicle when the driver turns around. He looks horrified and explains to her that when he looked in the rear view mirror, she had no head, a bad omen signifying her death, and that he had to drive around and confuse whatever evil spirit had followed her onto his jeepney. The woman finally gets out of the vehicle, but the next day wakes up to find a crowd and police outside her house. The jeepney had crashed into a nearby tree. That bad omen the driver had seen was for him, not his passenger.
So remember that creature I was telling you guys about earlier? The one that lives in the heart of the Romblon? Well, it isn't actually just some unknown entity, but rather it's an aswang. An aswang is an evil sort of shape-shifting witch-vampire hybrid that particularly enjoys the taste of human flesh and BLOOD. Sorry guys, you know I can't say that word on here. It preys on victims at night, assuming the forms of various animals, but mainly cats and wolves due to their stealth hunting abilities. It is said that when the aswang chooses its prey, it will perch on the top of their homes and use their snake-like tongue to survey the area. When the night reaches its darkest point, the aswang enters its victims' residences and eats them, or curses them. But believe it or not, in the case of the aswang, you'd probably prefer to get eaten because generally the curses involve either rice, sand, or even bugs pouring out of the orifices of those unfortunate enough to fall under the creature's wicked spell, and that's just gross. Sorry for telling you, but if I had to read about it, you have to hear about it and visualize it.
Next up, we have the hospital elevator urban legend. The story goes something like this. A doctor at a hospital was working late into the night. Now, this particular hospital is rather notorious. Strange stuff has been known to happen. Some say the whole building is cursed. But our doctor hadn't experienced anything unsettling at the hospital, never saw anything he didn't have a logical explanation for, which would all end on this very night. So the doctor is heading to the elevator, his shift is over, the doors open, and there's one other person inside. He goes to get in when suddenly his ears perk up. There's this painful moan coming from the end of the hallway. He turns around to see a patient running towards the elevator, arms outstretched, pleading with them to hold the doors. The doctor notices something and rushes into the elevator, repeatedly hitting the button for the doors to close. The other man in the elevator turns to the doctor and says, "What's wrong? Why'd you close the doors on him?" The doctor looks horrified. He takes a moment to compose himself before saying, "Didn't you see? That guy had a red wristband on. Only the corpses in the morgue have red wristbands. The elevator goes completely silent before the other man holds up his arm, saying, "You mean like this one?"
At our halfway point today, let's talk a bit about the My Way curse. As in My Way, the hit song written by Paul Anka and performed by none other than Frank Sinatra. It's great, right? Well, have you ever heard of the My Way killings that took place in the Philippines between 2000 and 2007, and then again in 2018? Well, if you haven't, buckle up because it is one hell of a ride. In 2007, the first My Way death occurred after a 29-year-old man attempted to sing the song at a local karaoke bar. He was off key, and so a security guard fired a projectile at the man, swiftly ending his singing career and his life. After that, the killings continued to the point where many karaoke bar owners actually removed the song from rotation. If you wanted to sing it, you had to book a private room for your own safety. After 2012, the killings had pretty much died down, probably because people were too scared to sing the cursed tune, but in 2018, a 28-year-old man was impaled by his 60-year-old neighbor after a fight broke out over the song. Later that year, a curfew was even imposed on karaoke bars in an attempt to lessen the violence. So I have to ask you guys, is the song cursed, or does the Filipino population just really dislike Sinatra?
The San Juanico Bridge took 4 years to complete. It's one of the longest bridges in the Philippines. But there's a dark legend behind it. It's said that during the bridge's construction, human remains were mixed in with cement, said to supposedly make the foundation of the bridge stronger. But these human remains weren't obtained in the most pleasant of ways. You see, from 1969 to 1973, as the bridge was being built, a number of missing young persons cases were reported in the surrounding area, a much larger number than usual. These reports then seemed to suddenly stop as soon as the bridge was completed, and it's said that a fortune teller told the overseer of the construction that the bridge would never be completed unless the BOOD of young people was mixed in with the cement.
Up next, we have the Multo White Lady. So what is a multo? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's the spirit of a dead person or animal that comes to visit family members who are still alive, and they're generally quite peaceful. In layman's terms, it's a friendly ghost. The White Lady is a multo, but a different kind of multo. You see, the White Lady doesn't just appear to members of her family. In fact, she doesn't even appear to just those who knew her. She kind of just appears in empty buildings, on the edges of cliffs, and near forests and roadways. Not only that, but she's said to be quite malicious. The White Lady, who is told to either have no face or a face covered in BLOOD, has been the cause of many car accidents over the years. Drivers reported crashing after looking into their rearview mirror only to see the woman sitting gruesome and eerie in their back seat. Many believe that the multo is a woman who was violated and killed by Japanese soldiers during World War II, and now she spends her days seeking revenge on pretty much anyone.
Our next urban legend deals with slippers and sandals being left outside. So this urban legend was apparently pretty big in the 90s especially. A lot of folks growing up at that time seemed to have stories about adults telling them not to leave their sandals, slippers, shoes, anything out in front of the house when coming in from playing out in the street, and to make sure to bring their footwear back inside. The reason being that cult members would apparently prowl the streets, and those whose flip-flops have been left outside would be kidnapped and sacrificed. These cult members were often said to be Satanists. I guess they'd figure if there was footwear sitting outside someone's home, they'd know there were people inside, so that they could attack. Maybe these cult members just hate messy front entrances so much it throws them into a blind rage. If anyone has more insight into this, let us know down in the comments.
Okay, you guys, it's Berberoka time. I don't know why I said it like it's a thing. I don't think it's a thing, but anyways, you're probably wondering what's wrong with me or what a Berberoka is. Well, it's daylight saving, so I'm down on sleep, and also a Berberoka is a mythical water creature found in the freshwater rivers of the Philippines. It's an ogre-like being that does a pretty good job blending in with its surroundings because of its skin, which resembles foliage-adorned rocks. It's probably friendly, right? Wrong. In fact, it's not friendly at all, and it does not like fishermen. The Berberoka's main move is to suck the water out of lakes until schools of fish become easily accessible to fishermen. When they try to catch the fish, the Berberoka spits the water back out, causing the fishermen to drown. I can't actually tell if he really hates fishermen or if he just really likes the fish, but let me know what you guys think.
And finally, we have the headless priests. Now, there are tales of ghostly headless priests apparently told in various parts of the world, but the Philippines is probably the most well known for this. So the tale of the headless priest, or priests, would be whispered about mostly in Catholic schools. It's just as the name suggests, it's a figure wearing a priest's robe, floating around without a head, often trying to retrieve it. As for how the priest died, there are a couple main versions. One is that the priest died at the hands of the Spanish during the colonial era, and the other that Japanese soldiers beheaded several Filipino priests during World War II. Number 4, Antarctic Godzilla. That's an intriguing title, isn't it? So it's February 13th, 1958. It's not actually, just imagine. A chilly evening in the Antarctic. The Japanese research vessel Soya Nihongo is cruising along the Lutzow Home Bay, minding its own business. It's 7 p.m. That crew's probably sipping some hot cocoa or whatever they do on research vessels when they're not actually researching. Then, out of nowhere, this colossal sea mammal, or some like to call it the Antarctic Godzilla, decides to make a grand appearance. Fast forward to 1974, off the Latelton Peninsula, another Japanese fishing vessel, probably thinking they were in for a routine day of catching fish, spots a creature that some boats think might be the same beastie encountered back in 58. They call it Kabagon. The creatures were both said to have large eyes and heads with grayish skin. Number 3, Organism 46b. So remember Lake Vostok? Well, this ties into that. Organism 46b is an urban legend centered around a mysterious aquatic creature, allegedly discovered by Russian scientists while drilling in Voltok Lake. The creature is said to be a gelatinous organism, almost like a giant squid, with incredibly deadly venom and the ability to rapidly shapeshift and mimic other marine life. According to the legend, Organism 46b has a unique method of hunting. It can extend a set of thin, flexible filaments from its body to paralyze and then consume its prey. The legend claims that the Russian scientists experimented with Organism 46b, attempting to understand its abilities and potentially weaponize them. These experiments went haywire, resulting in the deaths of several researchers. Then the Russian government covered up the incident. All sounds totally 100% true to me. And at second place, we have aliens and UFOs. So there are all kinds of myths and stories, and just people full on believing that Antarctica is teeming with alien life, hidden alien bases buried beneath the ice, crashed UFOs, government experiments involving aliens, the list goes on and on. In 2018, an ex-Navy SEAL disclosed information to an investigative journalist about a mysterious structure he and his team encountered during a classified mission in August of 2003. According to him, the team discovered a large dark structure protruding from the ice. The structure had doors, which when pushed, revealed a long hallway illuminated by green light, which didn't seem to come from any particular source. The walls inside were adorned with symbols and hieroglyphics that didn't resemble any seen on Earth. The remoteness of Antarctica with its extreme climate does make for the perfect setting for clandestine alien activities. And we're finishing off the list with another ghost story. The ghosts of Sir Robert Scott's tragic expedition. The expedition, officially known as the Terra Nova expedition, aimed to be the first to reach the South Pole. They would unfortunately never return. In 1911, Scott and his team of 25 men departed from Cape Evans, leaving behind the hut that would later become this iconic symbol of their ill-fated journey. The Cape Evans hut was the main hub before the group set off in the main stretch of their journey. The hut, preserved by the extreme cold temperatures of the Antarctic, has become a time capsule of the era. Scientific equipment, personal belongings, even frozen specimens like penguins the group had been studying remain in the same positions that they were right before they left. But despite its frozen state, the hut is not said to be totally devoid of activity. And I'm not talking about staff and stuff like that. Visitors and staff who have entered Scott's hut often report experiencing an eerie and unsettling feeling. Now that's to be expected, but the environment seems to carry this emotional weight, a sense of sadness and emptiness. But it's not just feelings they have. Odd things are said to happen there. Ghostly whispers, sightings of shadowy figures, and objects being found in places where they weren't left before. We're going to be starting off the list with a cautionary piece of advice. Be careful of the first person you allow into your home at the stroke of midnight. It's said that the initial person to set foot in your home on January 1st can either usher in good fortune or bring about bad luck for the entire year. The superstition implies that the character and disposition of the first guest can shape the tone of the upcoming year. If the first person through your door is considered kind, generous, or someone who embodies positive qualities, you can imagine it bodes well for the months ahead. On the flip side, if the first guest just kind of sucks for whatever reason and brings negative energy, it may set a tone of misfortune for the rest of the year. Number 9, air it out. The New Year's tradition of airing out your home involves opening doors and windows to let the old year's bad energy out and invite in fresh, positive energy for the coming year. The belief is pretty straightforward. By allowing these stagnant or negative vibes accumulated over the past year to exit, you create space for a new and favorable energy to make its way into your living space. The act of airing out the home is a symbolic cleansing ritual, a way to start the new year with a clean slate. It is believed that if you neglect this tradition, the residual negative energy from the previous year may linger and influence the atmosphere of your home in the coming months. People often engage in this practice on the first day of the year, sometimes as one of the first tasks of the day. It's about literally and metaphorically opening up to the possibilities and positivity that the new year might bring. And I have an idea for how you might want to usher in some good energy for your coming year. Why not hit that subscribe button down below? Tons of videos are going to be coming your way over the coming months, so don't miss out. Next up on the list we have making noise. Put down the book, get out of bed, and just get rowdy on New Year's Eve. It's very important, actually. The tradition of making noise at midnight on New Year's Eve is rooted in the belief that all the ruckus helps scare away evil spirits. The idea is to welcome the new year with some noise, warding off any negative energies that might have clung to the old one. This is a widespread practice across various cultures. Think of all the fireworks, the firecrackers, bells, horns that contribute to the collective racket. The noise isn't just for celebratory purposes, it's a deliberate effort to disrupt the peace momentarily to ensure a fresh start to the new year. The consequences of not participating in this noise-making tradition are sometimes believed to be dire. The silence during this transition could be seen as an invitation for negative forces to linger, unsettling the balance and harmony needed to usher in the new year. Number 7, the year walk. If you ever feel like gaining knowledge about events soon to come, you may want to participate in the following Swedish tradition. But practice caution, this tradition doesn't come without danger. And I'm not just talking about superstitious stuff either. I really mean it can kind of be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. The New Year's tradition of Arskang in Sweden is more commonly known as the year walk. The practice involves embarking on a solitary journey at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve, aiming to glimpse into the future and gain insights into your destiny. Those who partake in this solitary walk are believed to enter a realm between the living and the dead. The journey involves specific rituals, including abstaining from food and drink for an extended period, and walking through the woods, deep into the woods, to the point where you can no longer hear the sounds of civilization. Through this walk in the forest, participants might encounter supernatural entities and spirits that hold the power to foretell the events of the coming year. It's said that the spirits encountered during this trek can be unpredictable, providing cryptic messages, or in some versions of the tale, demanding a toll from the walker. The experience is described as physically and
psychologically demanding, with the boundary between reality and the supernatural becoming blurred. And obviously walking deep into the forest alone at night in the middle of winter has its inherent dangers, so don't say I suggested trying this. Things off with what is known as the Paulding Light, or the Dog Meadow Lights to locals. So this is a strange, unexplained light that locals will observe all the time. There's a freaky ghost story connected to it as well, and we'll get to that, but let me just stress that these lights aren't just something people talk about. There's plenty of video of the phenomenon. So yeah, look at that. It's kind of wild. This video here was posted by Johnny Shocker. In the description, he talks about how he'd seen the light on more than one occasion, and that it would float towards him, like floating in midair, then it would vanish, only to reappear and repeat the same process. So there's a lot of local folklore surrounding this mysterious light. Probably the most well-known is the tale of the railroad brakeman. At one time there were railroad tracks in the area, and one chilly night, the brakeman, with lantern in hand, spotted an oncoming train. But there were railway cars stopped on the tracks. He tried desperately to signal to the train, waving his lantern back and forth, but unfortunately he didn't get out of the way on time before being bulldozed by the train, which is kind of his fault. Like, you see the train coming from that far away and you can't just like hop out of the way. I know you're doing your job, but at some point you gotta put yourself first, you know? Alright, couldn't do this list without talking about the Michigan Triangle. Just like the infamous Bermuda Triangle, this is a section of Lake Michigan where all sorts of strange phenomena have taken place. Some are just stories, but there are very real occurrences as well. Missing planes, ships, people. There have also been a number of reported UFO sightings in this triangular section of the lake. The most famous ships to disappear in the area include the Lake Griffin, which vanished into thin air, last seen on September 18th of 1679. The wreckage was never found. The most famous incident involving a plane is the Flight 2501 incident. This was a flight carrying 55 passengers and 3 crew, which vanished during its flight on June 23rd of 1950 while flying over Lake Michigan. Then there's the story of Stephen Kubacki. He was a college student on a skiing trip who went missing in 1978. A massive search was launched, but he was nowhere to be found. A little over a whole year went by, and then out of the blue, the guy just shows up again. Even stranger, he had no memory of the time that had passed. Alright, we got some very interesting Bigfoot footage for you next. Yes, there have been a number of Bigfoot sightings in Michigan, and this one happened to be captured on camera by a man named Eddie V, who sent the footage to the Rocky Mountain Sasquatch organization. Alright, so I'd actually never seen this footage before, which I'm kind of surprised by, because it's pretty cool footage. The thing isn't obscured by trees, the camera's not shaky, you very clearly see something walking across the river, and to me, it doesn't look like a bear, it kind of looks like it's carrying something too. Some people say it could be a deer, or maybe a baby Sasquatch, if this is indeed a Sasquatch. I mean, could it be a dude in a suit? That's always a possibility, but I don't know. What do you all think of this one? It's a cool video to me. It kind of looks like almost like it doesn't even have fur or something. It's, I don't know, strange. Next up, we have the urban legend of Nain Rouge, aka the demon of the Strait. So this kind of falls into the cryptid category as well as folklore, which I always go nuts for. I love hearing about weird creatures that I've never heard of before. Nain Rouge is kind of similar to Mothman in that it seems to show up right before disaster strikes, almost like a harbinger of doom. But this thing isn't a giant moth creature. It's more like your classic red devilish kind of monster, or a hobgoblin as it's sometimes described. This red menace hails from Detroit specifically and is said to have appeared before major events like the Detroit riots in 1967 and the Battle of Bloody Run in 1763. The first major appearance of the creature is said to have been before Detroit's very own founder, Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac. The story goes that he'd seen a fortune teller who told him that he was to respect and appease this goblin-like creature, so he smacked it with his cane and told it to get out
out of his way. Then his political career took a nosedive, really didn't go so well. He was eventually banished from the city of Detroit. He was imprisoned for a time, lost all his money. Just don't be mean to the goblin monster, I guess. Next on the list, we have melon heads. The melon heads. I talked about these bulbous weirdos during one of my many Ohio urban legend slash cryptid videos. I was glad to get to talk about my little bobble-headed friends again on this list, but it turns out Michigan's brand of melon heads are a little more violent than the Ohio ones. Not something I'm assuming, it's just what I've read. Beginning sometime in the 1950s, tales of these strange, misshapen creatures began to spread around the city of Saugatuck. The story goes that the melon heads were youngsters suffering from hydrocephalus. They were being treated by a rather cruel doctor, and one day they rebelled against their mad doctor, taking his life before eating his remains. And they scuttled off into the forest, where they began living their new life, retreating in tunnels and caves under the city, occasionally coming out to terrorize innocent civilians. When you hear Lake Worth monster, you're probably picturing a sea creature of some kind, but no, it's a goat man. The creature is said to reside in Lake Worth, just outside of Fort Worth. It's described as this bizarre mix of a man and goat, but also has scales, so it's like a fishy man-goat. The legend dates back to July of 1969, when locals reported sightings of this half-human, half-goat creature perched on a cliff. A young couple who'd parked their car by the lake were the first ones to see the creature. They said it was massive, about 7 feet tall, and then more and more reported sightings came in, saying the goat creature would leap onto cars and hurl tires at people. Then in October of 69, a man named Alan Plaster snapped a photo of what he claimed to be the Lake Worth monster. Supposedly, this is it, and this photo started showing up in newspapers and magazines, which just fueled the stories even further until crowds were flocking to the lake at night. But whatever this thing was, if it really did exist, it was never found. The Lady of White Rock Lake. I'm sure Dallas locals will have heard of this one. White Rock Lake is about 20 minutes out of town, a nice getaway from the city, but there's a very spooky ghost story attached to it. As the legend goes, back in 1952, a tired couple found themselves driving home late one night after a party. The wife was dozing off when their car abruptly came to a halt. In the middle of the road was a woman in a torn white gown, drenched from head to toe. The husband offered her a ride, and she accepted. The wife was shocked at how icy the woman's touch was as she helped her into the back seat. They drove in silence until they reached the address that the woman gave them, an eerie, deserted house at the end of a desolate road. But when they turned to the back seat to speak to the woman, she was gone, leaving only a puddle of water behind. The couple was pretty freaked out, but figured maybe the woman had somehow gotten out of the car without them noticing, so they decided to knock on the door of the house. An old man answered the door, and when they described the woman to him, he told them the woman they had picked up was his daughter, but that she had drowned years ago in a boating accident. Ever since then, drivers have reported picking up a woman on the side of the road only for her to vanish before reaching her destination, always leaving a pool of water behind. The Frio River Valley is known for its own urban legend, the White Lady of Rio Frio. Maria Jimenez lived with her sister and brother-in-law, Gregorio, happily tending to her nieces and nephews on their ranch, but she dreamed of one day marrying and having children of her own. But Gregorio, despite being married, and married to Maria's sister no less, became infatuated with Maria. But when she rejected him, he flew into a rage and fatally shot her at her home later in the day. At her funeral, Maria's sister decided to dress her sister in her white wedding gown, as Maria never got to have a wedding of her own. It's said that Maria haunts the valley to this day, still wearing her sister's white wedding dress. But unlike a lot of tragic ghost tales like this, Maria isn't a vengeful spirit. She's just as caring and kind as she was in life. It's said she helps guide and comfort young people lost in the valley. Because she was unable to fulfill her own dream of starting a family, her spirit is said to care for the young people of her entire hometown. It's said you can spot her on misty nights, gracefully hovering over the water with her dress trailing behind her. The lechuza is a creature from Mexican folklore, a large, part woman, part owl-like bird creature with dark magical powers. But in Robstown, Texas in 1975, this creature became one of the biggest urban legends in the Lone Star State. Back in October of that year, the police started getting some unusual calls. People were reporting sightings of what they described as a monstrous bird. In Mexican folklore, the lechuza is believed to be a witch who can take on the form of an owl, but she keeps her human face and hair. Depending on who you ask, she could be the size of a regular owl or as big as a person. But the reports didn't specifically mention la lechuza at the time. That connection wasn't made until later. Instead, they described something that sounded just like a cross between a bird and a human. In Robstown, witnesses said it stood anywhere from 2 to 6 feet tall, with a bird body but a human-like face. There were also supposed sightings later on in Banquet and Alice. By January of the following year, folks in the valley were reporting encounters with a massive bird. In San Benito, 2 police officers even saw a bird with a wingspan that was apparently 10 to 12 feet long, flying over a lagoon. A radio station even put up a reward for capturing the big bird alive. And in Brownsville, a man named Alverico Gajardo told reporters he came face to face with a big bird right outside his door about 4 feet tall, saying it had a beak like a spear and eyes as big as silver dollars. He described his experience, saying, "That animal is not from this world. I was scared." Next, we have the donkey lady. A lot of scary lady urban legends in Texas. Any Texans in the audience want to explain why that is? The donkey lady is probably one of the most famous urban legends in the state, though. There are a few different versions of the tale, but they all center around a donkey-human hybrid. One version says a woman was badly burned, leaving her with hands that looked like hooves, and a face resembling a melted donkey. Awful. Another story goes that she was a woman who adored her pet donkey. When the donkey was taken away and mistreated by neighbors, they ended up drowning both the woman and her beloved animal, and now her spirit is said to linger near the Donkey Lady Bridge in San Antonio, Texas. This bridge, dating back to 1917, is where the spirit of the Donkey Lady is said to lurk to this very day. Back in the 60s, locals reported hearing eerie, donkey-like cries near the bridge, and the stories got passed on through the decades. This next story is actually kind of funny, I think. The Dancing Devil. If you're a San Antonio local, let me know if you've heard of this one, because it's pretty bizarre. On Halloween night in 1975, a man walked into El Camaroncito nightclub. It was an unforgettable night, but not in the way anyone was expecting or wanted. This mystery man was apparently an incredible dancer. The ladies were blown away by his incredible moves. They all wanted to dance with him. But at one point in the night, one of his dance partners happened to look down at the man's feet, and suddenly everyone heard this loud shriek. I picture the music stopping, everyone's just freezing, looking over. The woman had looked down at the man to see that his feet had transformed. Some said they looked like chicken feet, others described them more as hooves. The man then rushed into the bathroom and was never seen again. Some say he'd climbed out of the bathroom window, running off into the night, but there was also smoke left behind with a strange sulfur-like smell. The building is no longer a nightclub. It's changed hands a number of times, but the story of the Dancing Devil continued to be told, and staff at the building would say that there was a lingering sulfuric smell, especially in the men's bathroom. Next, we have the tale of the fang creature of Old Pearsall Road. Back in the 60s, a group of friends were driving home late one night along Old Pearsall Road. And by the way, if I'm pronouncing anything incorrectly, you let me know in the I already know you're gonna let me know in the comments. Anyway, they were driving along the road. They'd had a few drinks, this group of friends, and suddenly the driver swerved, convinced that he'd seen a little person in a white shirt and diaper with red stains around its mouth. After regaining their composure, the group continued on home. The next day, though, the driver just couldn't get the image of whatever that thing was out of his mind. Had he just imagined it? Was it an animal of some kind? Or even worse, was there actually a little youngster alone in the middle of the road that night that he almost ran over? He decided to drive back out there to take a look. But once he reached the spot, he realized he'd suffered a flat tire. He got out of the car to find 2 puncture marks on it. He changed the tire and then settled back into his car. He hadn't gotten a great sleep the night before, so he started to drift off, still pulled over on the side of the road. But then he woke up to a sharp pain on his neck. In complete horror, he realized the creature from the night before was now perched on his lap. Legend has it that the driver's sister later had a dream where he warned her never to venture down Old Purcell Road. Bowden Road in Huntsville is sometimes referred to ominously as Demon's Road. There's a lot said to go on here. Seriously, be careful driving along this road alone at night, because it sounds like you're taking a real risk. For starters, you have a ghost boy with glowing red eyes that's said to ride around on a tricycle and drag you to hell. Some people will claim to spot mysterious red lights and orbs along the road. There's a faceless monster that's said to stalk people walking or driving along it. And then there's the graveyard. Martha Chapel Cemetery. One story goes that in 2001, a man from Houston decided to visit the Martha Chapel Cemetery with his buddy. They parked near the graveyard. The driver stepped out of the car. His friend appeared to be sleeping in the passenger seat, and he didn't want to disturb him. So the man started walking through the cemetery. But he noticed something strange happening near one of the graves. The ground seemed to be moving. Suddenly, a hand reached up out of the ground and grabbed him on the ankle, but his friend ended up rushing over to help, and together they managed to break free and kick the hand back down into the ground. They ran back to the car, but suddenly the driver froze. His friend was actually still in the car. He'd been asleep the whole time. At least that's what it looked like. It wasn't until they were about a mile down Demon's Road that the driver realized his friend was actually dead. He'd suffered a heart attack while en route to the cemetery. We head to Corpus Christi, Texas now with the USS Lexington, a decommissioned World War II aircraft carrier that now operates as a museum, a supposedly very haunted museum. People will claim to spot shadow figures. There are also the full apparitions of 2 sailors, one that will help guide lost visitors back to the deck before disappearing, and one that likes to hang out in the engine room, explaining how the turbines work before vanishing into thin air. The museum official described one of the strangest things they'd ever experienced on the carrier involving their pen caps, saying, "I always use a ballpoint pen, and over the course of a few weeks, I lost about 6 pen caps off my desk. The day I lost the 6th pen cap, I turned over my office looking for them. My office was spotless by the time I was through. It wasn't until I returned to my office the next morning I found all 6 pen caps laying side by side right in front of my computer keyboard." Finally, we have another haunted Corpus Christi hotspot, Center Theater. Legend has it that the spirit of a woman employed as an usher at this theater still lingers to this day, bound to the theater after a terrible accident. According to the story, the woman died at the hands of her jealous lover as she exited the women's restroom on the upper floor near the mezzanine. She was fatally stabbed, her white uniform now stained in red. Visitors to the theater have reported strange things, especially in the area near the top of the stairs overlooking the seats. It's said that this is where the woman's ghost is most likely to be spotted. But she doesn't like people hanging around up there. Some are lucky to only feel an unexplained chill in the air. Others say they've been pushed, only to turn around and find that there's nobody else with them up there. At least no one living. At our number 5 spot, we have Knecht Ruprecht. This is a figure from German folklore who hangs out with St. Nicholas during Christmas. He's kind of like his disciplinary sidekick. Knecht Ruprecht translates to farmhand Rupert in English, and his job is to assist St. Nicholas in figuring out who's been naughty or nice. So while St. Nick is all about the rewards for the good ones, his buddy handles the not so nice list. They're kind of like a good cop, bad cop duo. Next, Ruprecht shows up in some towns dressed in tattered clothes, carrying a bag of ashes and a switch.
Yes, a switch, not the electric kind. He dishes out punishment to youngsters who haven't been on their best behavior. Some versions of the story say that Knecht Ruprecht gives his victims a chance to redeem themselves. He might ask if they know their prayers or if they've been doing their chores. If the answer is good, they might get some treats. If not, they could end up with a spanking. In some places, the tradition of Knecht Ruprecht has evolved into a more festive and less scary character, with people dressing up as him during Christmas parades or celebrations, but the core idea remains. He's the one you don't want to meet if you've been slacking on the good behavior front. Next up, we have the Christmas Witch. This is another character from European folklore. In some cultures, there's a tale of a Christmas witch who doesn't ride on broomsticks, delivering presents. Instead, she's on the lookout for misbehaving folks during the holiday season. Legend has it that this Christmas witch wanders the streets on Christmas Eve, peeking into houses to see if everything is in order. If she catches wind of any bad behavior or disobedience, she might decide to bring some not so festive consequences. Although, according to this list, a lot of bad stuff happens around Christmas, so maybe it is festive. Now, the specifics of the Christmas witch legend vary, but common themes include the witch leaving coal or sticks in the shoes of the naughty ones instead of gifts. In some regions, people incorporate the Christmas witch into their holiday traditions. They might tell stories about her to encourage good behavior in children, or even stage events where someone dresses up as the Christmas witch to keep the holiday vibes in check. At number 3, we have the living nutcracker. The story goes that an old toy maker put a spell on a nutcracker, giving it life. Not Pinocchio style, but enough to make it move around when no one's looking. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night and seeing a wooden nutcracker roaming around your house. According to the tale, it supposedly has a mission as well, to protect something valuable hidden in your house. As for what that thing is, different versions of the tale vary. So right now this all sounds pretty good, but the nutcracker isn't always friendly. Some versions say it's got a temper, especially if it thinks you're a threat to whatever it's guarding. So you go to grab a midnight snack and suddenly you're face to face with an angry wooden soldier with a nut-crushing jaw. Alright, here's one you've probably all heard of, but it had to make the list. It's Krampus, everybody. While St. Nicholas is busy rewarding the good kids, Krampus is out there dealing with the naughty ones. He's a horned, hairy creature with a long, pointed tongue and a bag or basket on his back. And that bag, well, it's not for carrying presents. Krampus is known for punishing misbehaving youngsters. He might swat them with bundles of birch branches or throw them in his sack to carry them away to who knows where. At the very least, he'll be leaving lumps of coal in your stocking. In many regions, there's a tradition called Krampusnacht, where people dress up as Krampus and roam the streets, scaring the living daylights out of anyone in their path. Now, the Krampus legend, it's been around for ages. It's become a mix of folklore and modern pop culture in recent years. Krampus shows up in tons of movies, many of which you can find for 10 cents in discount bins or for free on Tubi. Quality flicks. You can even find Krampus greeting cards, because nothing says Merry Christmas like a horned devil monster who terrorizes young people. Alright, let's wrap things up with the Bellschnickel, yet another character from German folklore. Europeans really do Christmas spooky. A Bellschnickel is like the eccentric uncle of holiday characters. He's known for his distinctive appearance, often dressed in tattered fur-covered clothing, and he carries a switch or a whip. Oh joy. Now, unlike some of his more extreme counterparts, Bellschnickel is not necessarily a punisher of the naughty. Instead, he's more about maintaining order and tradition during the holidays. His approach is a bit different. He might give small gifts and treats to well-behaved folks, but if someone has been a bit unruly or neglectful of traditions, they might get a smack with his switch. Hell's Bridge. So this bridge in Rockford is said to be haunted by demons and ghosts. Double whammy, demons and ghosts. I gotta say, probably best not to go to this bridge. So the tale goes that in the late 1800s, a number of youngsters were going missing in the town. And one night, the townsfolk decided that it might be time to, look for them. So they embarked on a massive search. They left the remaining young ones in town with an old man named Elias Frisk to watch over them while the adults were gone. Well, Frisk was not the innocent, weak old man that he pretended to be. He led the young girls and boys out into the woods, where he eventually revealed to them the location of all their missing little friends. He then took each of their lives one by one before dumping them into the Rogue River. When the townspeople arrived back in town, they found Fisk all alone, muttering to himself in an eerie tone. He was covered in blood and kept repeating the words, "The devil made me do it." Fisk was hanged from the Rockford Bridge, now haunted by the spirits of his victims and the demons that had possessed him. Alright, back to cryptids now with the Torch Lake Monster. In Antrim County, there is a tale of a creature said to stalk the waters of Michigan's longest and deepest inland lake, Torch Lake. Tales of this lake creature are most often told at night around Camp Hiawatha. The creature is also referred to as the sea panther, as it has the body of a lizard and the head of a cat, with slimy green skin and two different colored eyes, one blue and one brown. It's said that the creature will rise up from the lake at night to attack unsuspecting fishermen or campers. At best, it'll just chase you off and scare you away. If you're not so lucky though, it may drag you into the depths of the lake, never to be seen again. Next up is the Dogman. Werewolves gotta be my favorite mythological creature, so Dogman sightings get me real excited. The Dogman is a creature said to be, as the name suggests, a part man, part dog creature. It stands about 7 feet tall. What's extra creepy about this creature is that it's said to have a very unnatural howl. It doesn't sound like a wolf or even your classic werewolf. It sounds more like a man's scream, and something about that just sends a shiver up my spine. Monstrous creatures making human-like sounds just gives them this kind of uncanny valley sort of vibe. Very off-putting. There have been apparent Dogman sightings reported ever since 1887, where one witness supposedly died of fright after encountering the creature. There's also another famous story in the 60s where a bunch of hippies were in a van and they saw it peering into their window, though I wouldn't really trust what hippies said, especially in the 60s, because, you know, they were on a lot of stuff, but who knows. Second to last on the list are the singing sands of Abete Gris. The sands of these beautiful beaches in the northern Upper Peninsula are said to sing. And actually, they're not just said to, they really do. When you rub your hands through the sand, it makes this high-pitched whooshing kind of sound, which is not actually a sound you'll get on every beach. So the legend goes that a long time ago, a Native American woman lost her lover in the waters of Lake Superior. She spent countless days returning to the beach, crying out and singing for him in a desperate hope that he would one day find his way back to her. Her cries are said to be heard in the very sand itself to this day. And what makes the singing sand even stranger is that the legend goes if you remove the sand from the beach, take it somewhere else, try and make it sing, it no longer makes any noise. Finally though, we have the old Presque Isle Lighthouse. Nothing more classic than a good old-fashioned lighthouse ghost story. This lighthouse was erected in 1840, but it wasn't in operation for very long. Less than 30 years later, it had fallen into disrepair and was replaced by another lighthouse a little farther up north. In 1977, it became a museum, owned and operated by George and Lorraine Paris. Now, all the wiring had been removed. The lighthouse was no longer operational, but in 1992, just a year after George had passed away, a number of people, from pilots to sailors, had reported seeing a distinct glow coming from the old lighthouse. And passers-by have told stories of spotting a mysterious figure lurking about the lighthouse, only to vanish into thin air. Many locals believe the ghost of George Paris still visits his beloved lighthouse from beyond the grave. Starting off with a Gryla. Gryla is an old Icelandic myth about a giantess who's not your typical grandma. She's a bit of a nightmare, literally. She lives up in the mountains and has a taste for human flesh, especially if you've been misbehaving. And even worse, she's got a whole family. Legend has it she's been married 3 times, and her 13 sons, known as the Yule Lads, are real pieces of work too. But if you're lazy, disobedient, or just plain unlucky, you might end up on Gryla's menu. She stuffs her victims in a sack and takes them back to her cave where she cooks them in a large pot. Then you have her sons who come down from the mountains one by one in the 13 nights leading up to Christmas, mostly to play pranks on people. Each lad has his own thing, like stealing leftovers, slamming doors, or just being plain annoying. They're not quite as evil as their mom, just mischievous. Gryla's been around in Icelandic folklore for ages, used by parents as a way to keep their younger ones in check during the holiday season. And if you want to give yourself a gift this holiday season, why not subscribe to our channel? We have tons of videos coming your way on the daily, and most importantly, it's free to subscribe. Number 9, Hans Trapp. Hans Trapp is a bit of a dark character from the folklore in the Alsace and Lorraine regions of France. Long story short, he was a rich dude who got a bit too greedy and made a deal with the devil. So Hans Trapp starts doing some shady stuff like worshipping Satan and messing with the poor. The church wasn't too thrilled about that, so they excommunicated him. Hans got kicked out of his fancy life, loses his wealth, and ends up living in the woods like a hermit. But Trapp's story doesn't end there. He started disguising himself as a scarecrow, wearing old tattered clothes and putting hay on his body. He'd hang out in the fields, waiting for young ones to pass by. When some unfortunate soul came too close, he'd jump up and scare the living daylights out of them. The legend goes that Hans Trapp took his scarecrow act a step further and decided to snack on misbehaving youngsters. Yes, he'd kidnap and eat them. The whole scarecrow turned cannibal thing was a cautionary tale parents told their youngsters to keep them in line. Now, people in those parts don't forget Hans Trapp, and there's even a tradition where they dress up as him during Christmas, just to remind everyone to stay on the straight and narrow. In at number 8, we have Kalikidzaros. Kalikidzaros are these creatures that live underground, and for most of the year they're stuck there, trying to saw down the world tree. Weird, I know. The thing is, they believe that once they manage to cut it down, the whole world will collapse, and then they can take over. These creatures, during the 12 days of Christmas, are let loose on the surface, and they don't come out to spread cheer. Instead, they go out causing chaos, playing pranks, and generally being pains in the neck. Now, luckily, they forget what they're doing when the sun comes up, but every night they start their mischief all over again. People in Greece came up with some ways to keep these creatures busy and away from causing too much trouble. One trick is to burn a Yule log for the entire 12 days. Apparently, the light messes with their heads, and they forget their task. Another tactic is hanging a pig jawbone by the door, because Kalikidzaros are scared of pigs. Go figure. Next on the list is the Yule cat. This is a giant cat from Icelandic tales, and it's incredibly strange. A lot of the stuff on this list is like, don't be bad, or you'll get beaten or eaten. Harsh legends, but at least they make sense. This one is a bit out of left field. As the legend goes, this enormous cat shows up around Christmas Eve, and it's a real dink of a cat because it torments people who don't receive new clothes to wear on Christmas Eve. So yeah, if you're not rocking some fresh threads for the holidays, this cat will come along and just straight up eat you. Back in the day, getting new clothes before Christmas was a big deal, and to make sure everyone got their act together, the Yule cat legend was born. I don't know why I asked to take it all out on the people that don't get the clothes, though. That's not really up to them, but it's a cruel world out there. Number 6, Perchta. Alright, this one gets pretty intense. Forget just eating people. Things get very gory and specific here. Perchta, also known as Frau Perchta or Berchta, is said to roam around during the 12 days of Christmas, from late December to early January. Now, she's got a bit of a dual personality thing going on. On one hand, she's a real sweetheart, rewarding good behavior, but she can change on a dime, punishing the lazy and messy severely. If you've been a decent human, Berchta might leave you a silver coin as a little holiday bonus. But if you've been slacking off, especially when it comes to household chores, just watch out. She's known for being a bit of a cleanliness freak, and if she catches wind of your messy ways, she might just decide to slice open your stomach, pull out your guts, and stuff you with straw or garbage. To say that punishment is a tad unhinged would be an understatement. Next up, let's talk about laundry.
and the fact that you may want to avoid doing it on New Year's Day. I know you may have some fresh new threads now soiled from the rowdy partying you did the night before. Washing your clothes on New Year's Day is said to bring misfortune. According to this tradition, washing clothes on the first day of the year is akin to washing for the dead. And it's said that a family member will inevitably pass away in the coming year. Now, that's pretty bad, but there's an additional layer to this superstition. Those who ignore the warning and proceed to wash a load of laundry on New Year's Day are believed to invoke a self-imposed curse as well. Such an action will lead to a year filled with an excess of laundry. Now that is truly nightmarish. Kinda contradicts the death part. Really, there should be less laundry, seeing as someone in your household kicked the bucket, but I'm just not gonna risk it. Hoarders rejoice, for at number 5, we have not getting rid of anything until January 2nd. Now, this doesn't just mean keeping your old jeans or that half-empty bottle of shampoo or all those gifts from Christmas that you're gonna just re-gift. It extends to pretty much anything you'd think of tossing. Trash, nope, gotta let it sit. Old magazines, better keep them for one more day. That broken toaster, it's part of the furniture now, until tomorrow. The idea behind this odd tradition is that whatever you do on the first day of the year really sets the stage for the next 364 days. So if you dare to declutter or dispose of things, you're practically sending out eviction notices to good vibes. According to this tradition, cleaning house on New Year's Day is like cleaning out your life, but not in a good way. It's said that there will be a constant stream of departures, not just of stuff, but people as well. At the very least, relationships could end, but once again, this could also mean some people you know will die, so try to avoid that. So if you're into superstitions or just want to hedge your bets against a year filled with exits, the advice is clear. On New Year's Day, hold on to everything and don't even think about taking out the trash. Number 4, the Namahage. The Namahage is a traditional Japanese folklore figure, primarily associated with the Oga Peninsula in Akita Prefecture. It's a bit like a folkloric boogeyman, usually depicted as a demon or ogre. The Namahage, typically portrayed with a grotesque mask and straw garments, is part of a unique New Year's tradition called the Namahage Seido Matsuri. During the Namahage Seido Matsuri, groups of men dress up as Namahage characters and visit homes in the community. These Namahage go from door to door, wielding wooden knives and shouting in a loud, intimidating manner right into people's faces. The purpose is to ward off evil spirits, bring good fortune for the coming year, and, most importantly really, scare the crap out of lazy people who do nothing for the community. The Namahage characters often ask the people inside about their behavior and their work ethic, reminding them to be diligent and virtuous. It's a blend of entertainment, superstition, and cultural reinforcement. The tradition is deeply rooted in the region's history and agricultural lifestyle, emphasizing the importance of hard work and community values. So, this next thing has become something of an urban legend in relatively recent years. The idea that folks in Chile celebrate in graveyards on New Year's Eve. Well, this is actually partially true. Some locals of Talca engage in a unique practice to honor the departed. As the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve, families gather at the resting places of their deceased loved ones. This tradition is actually relatively recent, starting in the late 80s. A Talcan family chose to welcome the new year at the grave of a recently departed relative who had served as an employee of the cemetery. Over time, this practice gained popularity, and authorities responded by actually leaving the cemetery gates unlocked on New Year's. Families bring food and drinks to share a meal by the graveside, creating an atmosphere that kind of transcends the boundary between the living and the dead. Candles are lit, and the graves are adorned with decorations, a way for the living to connect with their roots, paying tribute to those who have passed away. Some even choose to spend the entire night next to the graves of their departed relatives, sleeping beside the resting places of loved ones as a way to usher in the new year while maintaining a close connection with those who have come before. I like this tradition. Number 2, the tradition of eating soba noodles in Japan. If you're looking for the perfect New Year's Eve meal, this may be it. But like with everything on this list, be careful. The good that comes along with the tradition comes with a risk of bad luck. So this involves eating soba noodles just before midnight, symbolizing a wish for longevity and a clean break from the old year. But there's a darker belief tied to it. If you fail to finish the noodles by the time the clock strikes midnight, it's said to bring misfortune and may impact the length of your life. The idea is that the act of consuming the noodles before the new year marks a transition and ensures a clean start, but leaving any part of the noodles unfinished may disrupt this practice, potentially inviting bad luck into the coming year. And finally, we have the tale of the peeping Tom. So it was New Year's Eve in Alabama. A woman awoke to the sound of yelling coming from her yard. Her husband had gone to take out the trash at 11 p.m., thankfully, before the clock struck midnight. But he'd seen something terrifying. It was a man completely nude, aside from the Ronald Reagan mask he was wearing and the sock covering his privates, peeping into the window of their bedroom. The husband yelled at the intruder to leave, and luckily he scuttled off into the night. The police were called, but the intruder was never seen again. This is a true story. It happened to reality TV star Danielle Yancey, who shared the surveillance footage of the incident online. Next up, we have the legend of the Bundy Man, which started with two very real police reports in Fairfax County, Virginia. The first one went down on October 19th, 1970. A young couple was parked on Guinea Road in Burke, just sitting in their car when something moved behind them. Then this guy steps out of the bushes in a white suit with long rabbit ears and starts yelling about private property. Before they can react, he hurls a hatchet straight through their passenger window. The couple floors it out of there, of course. 10 days later, another guy sees him. A security guard named Paul Phillips was checking on a construction site nearby when he spotted a man standing on the porch of an unfinished house in a rabbit suit. Phillips starts talking to him, and the guy immediately starts hacking away at the porch post with a full-sized axe. Tells Phillips he's trespassing, threatens to chop his head off. Phillips goes to grab his piece, coming back, and the rabbit man is now sprinted off into the trees. After those two reports, Fairfax police got flooded with calls. More than 50 people claimed that they saw this bunny man. The Washington Post ran multiple stories on him. Some callers even said he ate a guy's runaway cat. But none of this ever went anywhere. No arrest, no name, nothing. And like every good urban legend, though, the story mutated. By the 90s, a more dramatic version had spread online, claiming the Bunny Man was an escaped killer from 1904 who haunted a railroad bridge. Fairfax archivist Brian Conley dug into all of that and found that every detail about the escaped convict story was fake. But what is real are those two reports from 1970. As for who the hell the guy was or what happened to him, who knows? I thought I heard about every American cryptid story, but apparently not. And that's surprising because this is a crazy one. So back in 1903 in Van Meter, Iowa, a bunch of townspeople claimed that they saw a large winged creature flying around at night. Multiple witnesses and respected members of the community too, including a doctor and a banker. They described it as having bat-like wings, a horn on its head that glowed, and gave off a horrible smell. The creature reportedly perched on rooftops, left giant three-toed tracks in the ground, and shattered a window at one point. People were so freaked out they started forming armed patrols. Newspapers at the time covered this as well, so that, combined with all the witnesses, in this case has a lot more weight than a lot of the rumors and stories you usually read about. One of the creepiest details is that the creature was said to retreat into an old abandoned mine outside town, and some people claim they heard more than one creature moving around in there. After a few nights of chaos, though, the sightings suddenly stopped. Everything just kind of went back to normal. But all the original witnesses stood by their stories the rest of their lives. People who hike in the Santa Alicia Mountains always talk about how quiet the place feels. Eerily quiet. Almost like something's there, just beyond the trees, freaking out all the animals. And maybe that's not just people's imaginations getting the better of them. The Dark Watchers are these tall, human-shaped figures people claim to see standing along the ridges, usually right before sunset. They don't move, they just stand there staring out over the valleys. The Chumash people have been telling stories of these shadowy beings forever. Early settlers mentioned them as well, so it's not some recent internet thing. Hikers say they'll notice a shape on a ridge, perfectly still, almost blended into the rocks. When they look back a second later, it's gone. Nobody ever reports them coming closer or making any noise. They just watch. Is it a trick of the light? Are people's eyes playing tricks on them with the fog that rolls through the mountains? Sure, maybe. Or maybe when you're hiking out in those desolate mountains and that heavy feeling of being watched presses down around you, there's a reason for it. Maybe something older has been
lurking around those mountains long before any roads were built. On a stretch of old railroad tracks outside Gurdon, Arkansas, people keep seeing this mysterious floating light. It shows up in different colors depending on who you ask, sometimes bluish, sometimes orange, and it moves in ways car headlights don't. And not to mention, stories of the Gurdon light began long before there were paved roads here, so it's not so easy to write this off as car lights from far away. People say it shows up often when the air is cold or still. If you're walking the tracks at night, you may see the eerie glow hovering above the rails. The story usually goes that a railroad worker was killed during an accident back in the 30s, and the light is said to be his lantern swinging as he wanders around the tracks searching for his head. Whether a railroad worker actually lost his head or not, what does keep the legend alive is how many people claim to see the light. Even TV crews have tried filming it. Sometimes it appears far down the tracks, other times it drifts close enough that people say it feels like it's following or watching them. And when they try to walk toward it, the light just fades or slips into the trees. In parts of Ohio, especially around wooded back roads in Lake County, people grew up hearing about these small, pale, humanoid creatures with oversized heads living out in the forest. Every area has its own twist on the tale, but Ohio's version is the most famous, with people claiming to see these things in the trees while driving at night. The story goes that these melon heads, as they're called, came from a group of children who were experimented on in this old facility out in the woods. One day they rebelled against the mad doctor holding them there and set the place on fire before escaping into the woods. It's hard to trace where that part started, but the sightings are what really gave the legend its weight. Drivers say they've seen things crouched near ditches or darting across the road on all fours. Others have reported hearing strange crying or whispering from the trees. Another Ohio legend, the Loveland Frogman. This one comes from a string of sightings near the Little Miami River. First known sighting was in May of 1955. This lonely stretch of road running along the Miami River. It's in the middle of the night, about 3:30, and a businessman named Robert Honeycutt is driving through the outskirts of Loveland, Ohio. The road is quiet. There's nothing around but trees and the river, but suddenly Honeycutt spots three figures standing on the side of the road, and they're not people. They don't look like any animals he's ever seen either. They're three small, upright shapes. Pulls over and watches them for a few minutes, trying to make sense of what he's looking at. All three are only about 3 or 4 feet tall, with this gray leathery skin that shines a bit in the headlights. Their hands and feet look webbed, and the part that really throws him off is their faces. They're shaped like frogs. Big heads with these deep folds where hair should have been. He sits there in the dark, staring at them, trying to stay quiet, when one of the creatures suddenly raises something above its head. Honeycutt described it almost like a wand, and then sparks shoot out of the tip. And that's all he needs. He hits the gas and gets out of there. The next reports wouldn't come until 1972, when a police officer said he saw roughly a 4-foot-tall creature standing upright on the side of the road, which then leapt over the bridge into the river. And his description was eerily similar to the one from 1955, a frog-like figure with leathery skin. A few weeks later, another officer claimed he saw the same thing. Today, the Loveland Frog is seen mostly as a joke, but locals will also say the area does have a certain vibe about it. It's full of old bridges and quiet parks and spots by the water where headlights only illuminate a tiny piece of the road. So, it's easy to imagine something slipping in and out of view. In April 1977, a teenager named Bill Bartlett was driving with 2 friends, Mike Mazika and Andy Brody, in Dover, Massachusetts, when his headlights hit something climbing along a stone wall. He said it was small, around 3 or 4 feet tall, with a huge smooth head and long, thin fingers. He drew it that night, and the sketch pretty much became the face of the Dover demon legend. Now, it's an odd story, sure, but what really keeps this one alive is that 2 more teenagers reported seeing the same creature in different spots over the next 2 days. The groups didn't know each other, but their descriptions matched Bartlett's drawing almost perfectly, and none of them outright claimed that it was an alien or a monster. They just said, well, they saw something that they couldn't explain. But no one ever saw it again after those 2 days. Gotta say, that almost makes it creepier to me. A cluster of sightings and then nothing? It makes it less likely to be a misidentified animal or something, because sightings would be way more common in that case. Even now, people in Massachusetts bring it up as one of the weirdest, most concentrated sets of cryptid sightings in the state. On Staten Island, older kids used to scare each other with stories about Cropsey, this man, or perhaps not a man, who lived in the abandoned buildings and woods near the old Willowbrook State School. He was kinda like the local boogeyman, lurking around the edges of the island, watching for youngsters walking walking alone. For a long time, it was just a story whispered about on the playground, but the atmosphere around Willowbrook made the legend heavier. The school was infamous for how badly people were treated there, and the empty buildings sitting in the woods made the whole area feel haunted before anyone even said the name Cropsey out loud. And throughout the 70s and early 80s, several young people went missing on Staten Island. That gave the legend a much darker tone too. Something about it just felt too real, too grounded to be a simple campfire tale. Next on the list is a story we've all heard at some point in our lives, The Hook. This one goes all the way back to the 50s. The setup is always the same. A couple is sitting in a car on a lover's lane, listening to music, maybe chatting, usually making out though. When they hear a scratch or a thump outside, they debate whether to check it out. The guy usually acts brave, the girl gets nervous. Eventually they drive off, if they survive anyway. When they get home, they find a metal hook hanging from the door handle. The story spread everywhere. High schools, drive-ins, sleepovers. Each version changed slightly depending on the town. People said the man with the hook was an escaped patient from a hospital or some drifter who'd been seen wandering the area earlier in the week. It worked though, because it felt like it could happen anywhere. Every small town has a dark road or a hill where couples go to be alone. The idea that someone was creeping out of the bushes to gut you with their hook hand is a pretty chilling idea. Finally, the Bell Witch story comes from the early 1800s in Adams, Tennessee. It's one of the few haunting legends where the spirits supposedly talked. The Bell family said they were tormented for years by something in their house. They'd hear knocking on the walls, scratching sounds, objects would move on their own. They'd hear a voice that seemed to know everything happening around the property. John Bell, the father, became the main target. Spirit would argue with him, harass him, and threaten his life. And when they had people over, they'd claim to hear the voice too. Some said it would sing or mimic people from across the room, sometimes in a mocking tone, almost like a kid making fun of their sibling. Bell Witch got so famous at the time that even Andrew Jackson, who later became president, reportedly heard about it and visited the farm. The story goes that his group had trouble even getting their wagon onto the property because of whatever was there. John Bell eventually died in 1820. The family believed the witch had something to do with it. People in that part of Tennessee still talk about the Bell Witch Cave, which is near the old property. Some say the strange activity never really stopped.